from Colts Neck, if you could please turn on your cameras so that everybody could see you. Teacher coach, Holly Lucarelli. Lawyer coach, William Vizone. Students, Sophia Carlin, Sawyer Chang, Cassandra Dalton, Zarin Dolger, Avery Engel, Abigail Gilder, Jeffrey Carpelson, Robert Maravellius, Megan Smith, and Ethan Viliath. Congratulations, Colt Neck High School. Lower Cape May Regional High School, West Morris Mendham High School, Colt Neck High School, and all the students and teachers and attorney coaches should be very proud of their tremendous achievements. We thank you, your schools, and the parents for your support during this difficult time. We're honored to have the best of the best here today. Whatever happens today, I hope that everyone who's participated in this year's mock trial process comes away with the lesson of how good it feels to see in real time the results of your hard work and efforts. Nothing in this life is ultimately intellectually satisfying. I'm a civil trial attorney. I've been practicing for 30 years. I've had over 100 jury trials to verdict and hundreds of jury trials that settle during trial. I can tell you that nothing feels better than when you've prepared your case, prepared your witnesses, prepared your exhibits, and you are running on all cylinders. It's why I love what I do. Being a trial lawyer is like being a lead actor in a Broadway play, except you don't always know what the other actors are going to say, and the audience is yelling objection, interrupting your performance. But it's a wonderful way to practice. The Foundation's mock trial competition is made possible by the hard work and dedication of the Mock Trial Committee, which is chaired by the wonderful Ron Appleby Esquire and is administered by Sheila Burrow, Director of Mock Trial Programs. Each year, the committee oversees procedures, reviews policies, creates original topical cases, and strives to make the competition a valuable educational experience. We think they have succeeded in this admirably, particularly given this unprecedented challenge that they faced this year and their steadfast determination to make the competition possible safely during COVID. We also give thanks to New Jersey's county bar associations and all the volunteer lawyers who work tirelessly during the local competitions. In addition, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to all the judges and attorneys, including Chief Justice Stuart Rabner, Judge Marilyn Clark, and so many others throughout New Jersey who have taken time from their busy schedules to judge the competition at the county and state levels. Let me tell you a little bit about the State Bar Foundation. The State Bar Foundation provides the public with a variety of law-related educational services. These include our Speakers Bureau, which fills requests for attorneys to speak to school and community groups. We provide scholarships to law students. We give law-related seminars to the public. We conduct this Vincent J. Apruzesi High School Mock Trial Competition. We have a special lawfare program and competition for 3rd to 6th graders, a mock trial program for 7th and 8th graders called Law Adventure, a mini court booklet for grades K to 2, and we also provide conflict resolution, teasing and bullying, and Holocaust education for the teachers. Today, we're actually honored to have Mr. Vincent Apruzesi in the virtual audience watching today's proceedings. Hello, Vincent. We also published a Legal newspaper for grades 5 and up and the Respect newsletter for grades 6 and up. These are wonderful periodicals we provide to the schools. 2 years ago, and time flies, we celebrated a milestone in Foundation history. It was our 60th anniversary of service to New Jersey citizens. We are very proud of the past, proud of the present, and we look forward to the next 60 years with equal enthusiasm and purpose. For more information about the Foundation's free public services, visit our website, www.njsbf.org, or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also view our videos on YouTube. Just search New Jersey State Bar Foundation. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our distinguished judges. The Honorable Stuart Rabner, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of New Jersey, and the Honorable Marilyn C. Clark, recently retired as the Presiding Judge, Criminal Division of Passaic County. Judge Clark also serves on judicial recall in the criminal division. As the judges come in, I'd like to tell you a little bit about them. Chief Justice Stuart Rabner was sworn into office on June 29th, 2007, after being nominated by Governor John Corzine and confirmed by the Senate. He is the 8th Chief Justice to lead the New Jersey Supreme Court since the 1947 New Jersey Constitution. After beginning his career as an assistant U.S. attorney, Chief Justice Rabner worked in a number of positions, including first assistant U.S. attorney.
Alcohol and his, hello?
Clark, you're on. Sorry. And chief of the terrorism unit. He was chief of the office's criminal division, and he was named chief counsel to Governor Corzine in January 2006. He was named New Jersey Attorney General in September 2006 and served in that position until his nomination to the Supreme Court. Judge Clark, who's been kind enough to volunteer her time and judge our mock trial championship rounds for many years and has been a technical advisor on many of our mock trial cases. We thank her, Ron Appleby, and the mock trial committee for the countless hours they've devoted to bring our mock trial cases to fruition. Judge Clark has served as the presiding judge of the criminal division in Passaic County since October of 1996. Prior to her judicial appointment, Judge Clark was a law clerk at Bergen County Judge James Toscano and spent 12 and a half years as assistant prosecutor in Bergen County. Her assignments included chief of the trial section, chief of the grand jury section, chief of the sex crimes and child abuse unit, and chief of the juvenile section. We are honored that the Chief Justice and Judge Clark are both here with us today. They are among the finest public servants New Jersey is blessed to have. Before we begin the final round, we'd like to recognize the winners of the New Jersey State Bar Foundation's Courtroom Artist Student Competition. This was the 6th year we held this competition. It's in furtherance of our efforts to engage in multidisciplinary approaches to educate the public regarding the rule of law and the legal process, including through art. I would like now to honor the following students and their schools. As I say your name, if you could please turn on your camera so everybody could see you. In first place, Maeve Grennan from Morristown High School. In second place, Abigail Cisneros, Cranford High School. There was a tie for third place. Melissa Bosjancic from Hunterdon County Polytech and Alicia Valentin Roman, Middle Township High School. Honorable mention, Emily Crabb, the Academy of St. Elizabeth. Audrey Fox, Morristown High School. Michelle Kagramian, Marine Academy of Technology and Environmental Science. Aaron Nagler, Livingston High School. Katarina Pasichnik, Cumberland County Technical Education Center. And Michelle Zuniga, Cumberland County Technical Education Center. The student artists sketched the mock trial teams via Zoom during preliminary rounds of the Foundation's mock trial competition. We'd also like to thank the judges of our courtroom artist contest, Aggie Kenny and Elizabeth Williams, they're professional courtroom artists and authors, and former Foundation trustee Brian Neary, a noted criminal trial lawyer. We appreciate their continuing efforts and their support. We are now ready to begin the final round of our 39th mock trial championship. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you also for the work that you and the foundation do, which is so important. And this program this morning is one of many that is so meaningful. We are here, of course, this morning for the trial of Eli Adam, the state of Nancy Adam, and Kai Cruz versus City of Metropolitan. May we please have appearances of counsel? Let's start.
Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Nicholas Fry, along with my co-counsel Holly Caravanis.
Good morning, Your Honors.
We represent the 3 plaintiffs, Eli Adam, the estate of Nancy Adam, and Professor Kai Cruz.
And for defense?
Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Charles Sager.
And my name is Margaret Lee.
And we represent the defense, the City of Metropolitan, in today's trial.
Welcome, counsel. Are you prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honors, we're prepared to proceed to a pre-trial conference.
Are there any preliminary matters you'd like to raise?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to make the court aware, pursuant to page 44 of the jury charge form, that we are in federal district court for the District of Metropolitan. We would also like to make known clarification number 8, posted on the New Jersey Bar Foundation's website, which states that there should be no references to student juries.
Your
We
Honor,
also,
I'm sorry to interrupt. May I be heard on that matter regarding clarification number 8? So there appears to be some confusion as to whether we're proceeding today as a bench trial or a jury trial. I know the case materials we've been provided with include the statement of facts, which mentions a jury, as well as stipulation 18, which also mentions a jury. We've been provided with the jury charge and jury verdict form, and clarification 8, which opposing counsel referenced, only says no mention should be made of a jury because there's no student jury present here today. So the defense is ready to proceed as a bench trial, as a jury trial, I'm sorry, just with no jury impaneled here today.
We'll hear from
Your
plaintiff.
Honor, it is the plaintiff's viewpoint and interpretation of stipulation 18, and in pursuant to clarification number 8, that this is a bench trial. Considering the clarification says that there should be no reference whatsoever to a jury.
Can the clarification that you have, can you read it for the court?
One moment, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I have the clarification in front of me if you would like.
Please go ahead.
It says, since there will not be student jurors in the online competition, no reference should be made to jurors.
All right, that was my understanding as well. Here's my request. Present your case, present your arguments to the court, and we will decide at the end whether we will issue a verdict on the merits or simply work on our commentary and scoring and deliver comments and tell you who the winner of the case is. But do everything that you would ordinarily do, and don't worry about whether there will be an actual verdict on the merits. Does that help?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right. Any other preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. We would ask that the bailiffs and timekeepers give a 1-minute warning in the chat on all opening and closing and direct and cross examinations, as well as 30 seconds on any redirect or recrosses.
All right.
We'd also like to make known Joint Exhibit A, which is a 911 phone call between Chief Marcin Wojciechowski and 911 dispatch, and ask that it be marked as Joint Exhibit A as it appears in the workbook.
That's fine.
In addition, we ask that there be a 5-minute recess before the presentation of summations.
Yes. Any other issues?
Not at this time for the plaintiffs.
And for the defense, are there any preliminary matters you'd like to raise?
Yes, Your Honor. First, we'd like to mark the statements of the plaintiff's witnesses for identification purposes only, with a statement of Eli Adam as D1, the statement of Kai Cruz as D2, and the statement of Shiloh Pittsburgh as D3.
Very well. Anything else?
Your Honor, we would also like to direct the court and timekeeper's attention to Rule 2:9 that states the time must be stopped for objections and time may resume once the objection is resolved. We would also like to direct the court and timekeeper's attention to Online Rule 1.8 that states the team that is performing at the time, timekeeper, will be keeping time for their proceedings. So our timekeeper, Ashley Cespedes, will be keeping time for our opening statements, our direct examinations, when a defense attorney is performing their cross-examination, and the defense is closing. An opposing counsel's timekeeper will do the same for them.
I gather you've instructed your respective timekeepers of what they should be doing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Right. So there's not much need for the court on that score. Anything else you'd like to raise?
No, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
Very good. Then all that I would draw your attention to before we proceed is as to objections. If either side has an objection, please state it. Please state it succinctly. Direct your comments to the court. We will ask the other side ordinarily to respond. And then if there's additional information requested, we'll ask for it, but let's try to avoid having a back and forth among counsel Just succinctly state the basis for your objection, and we'll take it from there. Let's proceed with opening statements.
Your Honor, before we proceed to opening statement, would you like us to introduce our witnesses?
That's not necessary. You'll call each witness as they are presented to offer their testimony. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Can we indicate to them that you'll be handling the opening statement and the plaintiff's witness objections, and I'll be doing the second half, so it should be directed essentially to you? In the plaintiff, yeah.
You've heard Judge Clark, and she's spot on as usual.
Okay. Thank you.
May I proceed,
Counsel,
Your Honor?
please proceed.
Good morning, Your Honors, opposing counsel, and the court. My name is Nicholas Fry, and along with my co-counsel, Holly Caravanis, we represent the three plaintiffs in today's proceedings: Eli Adam, the estate of Nancy Adam, and Professor Kai Cruz. Your Honors, as we've previously discussed in today's pretrial conference, there will be no student jury, and that you and you alone will be the sole triers of fact. Your Honors, we understand that you will not be instructing yourselves on matters of the law. However, we'd like to take this time to highlight some applicable legal standards. The first being that we are in federal district court for the District of Metropolitan, and that our case falls under Section 1983 of a Civil Rights Act passed by Congress. This act gives citizens of the United States the ability to sue their government when their constitutional rights are deprived. I submit to the court that on May 26, 2019, our client's Fourth Amendment rights, the right of the people to be secure in their person against unreasonable searches and seizures, was violated by Officer Jamie Cato, acting as an agent of the City of Metropolitan. In order to prove our cause of action, we must satisfy three legal elements by a preponderance of the evidence. The first being that Officer Cato was an agent of the City of Metropolitan. I would draw the court's attention to page 41 of the would-be jury charge, in which this fact is stipulated to. Secondly, we must prove that Officer Cato arrested the three plaintiffs. Defense counsel may argue that as a matter of law, we cannot satisfy this legal element pursuant to stipulation 13, which contains the metropolitan law that governs an arrest. This law is why we are here in federal court today. After hearing the testimony of Eli Adam and Kai Cruz, two of the three plaintiffs, how they were seized from the roadway, transported back to the Metropolitan Police Station, had their freedom of movement rescinded, and never charged with a crime, that these actions taken by Officer Cato will constitute a de facto arrest. Our last element that we must prove is that Officer Cato lacked probable cause to make such an arrest. Probable cause is whether or not a reasonable police officer would have believed the plaintiffs had or were committing offenses in their presence. Your Honors, I am aware that probable cause does not mean proof beyond a reasonable doubt. However, I submit to the court that it must be something than just a mere suspicion. Throughout today's trial, we will prove that as a matter of law, Officer Cato lacked probable cause to make an arrest. You will hear testimony that Professor Cruz was not committing any offensive harassment, but was simply exercising her First Amendment rights. You will hear that although Nancy Adam did throw a tomato at Chief Wojciechowski, Officer Cato was not there at the scene to witness this action. You will also hear that Eli Adam did shove Chief Wojciechowski, but because Officer Cato made himself an unreasonable police officer, they had no way of knowing that this action was solely in self-defense. The question has now become, why are we here? And the simple answer is because of Ms. Shiloh Pittsburgh. Ms. Pittsburgh will testify that on May 26, 2019, just a few hours after her friends and our clients were unlawfully seized and transported back to the police station, she overheard a dangerous conversation between Chief Marcin Wojciechowski and Lieutenant Tatum Varman, engaging in covering up the illegal and unlawful actions that Chief Wojciechowski took just a few hours before. If the defense counsel had it their way, the unlawful actions and the crimes that were committed against our clients would be swept under the rug. We are asking this court to put an end to the reckless and unconstitutional actions of the City of Metropolitan and the police department in the city, and finding them liable in today's case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. And for defense.
May
Ms.
it
Lee?
please- Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court and opposing counsel. Good morning. My name is Margaret Lee, and along with my co-counsel Charles Sager, we represent the defendant, the City of Metropolitan. Now, despite what Mr. Frey just told you, the defense does not dispute that the plaintiffs were arrested. However, we do contest the claim of false arrests, as the evidence will show that Metropolitan Police Sergeant Jamie Cato had reason to believe that the crimes had been committed and was present for the offenses. The sergeant met the standard of probable cause to make all 3 arrests and fairly arrested the plaintiffs because the plaintiffs instigated the incident, they escalated the incident, and they have no one to blame for the outcomes of that night but themselves. And today, the burden of proof lies with the plaintiffs, meaning they must prove by preponderance of the credible evidence that the actions of the defendant violated the plaintiff's civil rights. However, the plaintiffs will fail to meet this burden today, as we will demonstrate the facts that Sergeant Cato was reasonable and justified in making the arrests of each plaintiff. Today, the defense will present the testimony of Ms. Nico Reed, an eyewitness, and she will tell you that as Chief Wojciechowski was driving on Route 3, the car behind them, driven by Eli Adam, was repeatedly honking, flashing their lights, and tailgating them. And the evidence will show that Eli Adam knew the car the chief drove. Ms. Reed will explain that because of this aggressive driving from Mr. Adam, the chief wanted to pull over, but the plaintiffs followed. You'll hear that as he was driving, the chief called 911 and then began to slow down. Ms. Reed will tell you that once the chief had exited his vehicle and had stated he was an officer, he was struck square in the chest by a tomato thrown by one of the plaintiffs, Miss Nancy Adam. It was during this confrontation that Sergeant Jamie Cato arrived at the scene. And he will take the stand and testify that after arriving, he saw the chief fall. And you will hear from Eli Adam herself that she was the one to shove the chief. The evidence will show that Sergeant Cato was justified in making the arrest of Eli and Nancy Adam on charges of simple assault. That night, Sergeant Cato also arrested Plaintiff Kai Cruz, a friend of Eli Adam, on charges of harassment. And this too was justified. You will hear that when the sergeant arrived, he was startled by the loud and alarming language of Kai Cruz coming from a bullhorn late at night. You will learn that as the sergeant tried to approach the scene, Kai Cruz blocked his path. Mr. Cruz made a loud annoyance at a late hour, which gave the sergeant probable cause to arrest him on charges of harassment. We, the defense, will demonstrate the overwhelming evidence that Sergeant Cato met the standard of probable cause when arresting the plaintiffs, who instigated the incident, escalated the incident, and have no one to blame for the outcomes of that night but themselves. So I ask you now, as my co-counsel will ask you at the end of today's trial, to find the City of Metropolitan not liable for violating the civil rights of the plaintiffs. Thank you for your time and attention, and thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Will plaintiff please call its first witness? Counsel for plaintiff, who will be handling the first witness?
I believe
Excuse me, Your Honors, I believe that a few of my teammates have been kicked out, unfortunately, including the attorney that intended to direct the first witness, who has also been kicked out.
Let's take a moment then and see if we can correct the situation.
Thank you, Your Honors.
I'd ask our tech staff to bring back the lawyers and the witnesses, please.
We're working on that right now, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Particularly in the early days of adjusting to Zoom and whatever, all of us got kicked out, so at times. So
And we've taken breaks in the middle of actual proceedings as well. So
absolutely, absolutely.
we have gotten a little bit better. We have now had, in the full year that court proceedings have taken place virtually, more than 156,000 court proceedings that judges have conducted online that have involved more than 2 million participants. And we've had marvelous assistance from our IT staff, and I know we'll get the same help today.
And all of us have learned a lot, you know, and made the adjustments. So it's a lot smoother than it was the first month or two when we were all struggling. But some of the older attorneys would say, "Judge, I have no idea how to do this." You know? So.
A year ago this week, we had tutorials for every one of the judges, one-on-one tutorials with tech staff to learn Zoom, to learn Teams. We have 3 platforms that we use, and they paid a lot of dividends.
Oh, it did. It did. I'm just saying the 30-year-old attorneys and the 70-year-old attorneys had a different level of adjusting to this, you know, but they're pretty much all doing it pretty well now, really.
Can we get an update on how things look?
Your Honors, they're currently coming back into the courtroom. There appeared to be an issue with the school Wi-Fi, and they are reconnecting now.
I can see them slowly but surely joining, so just a couple more minutes.
Great, thank you. I'm tempted to use the downtime to talk about opening statements, but I think that would unnerve people. So I'll simply say you both did a very fine job.
I believe that my connection is now working, Your Honors.
And is the witness available as well?
I am not sure.
Yes.
Yet. Okay.
Now, I cannot see you. There you are. I'm going to try to move you over to the first screen if I'm able to. Let's see.
And I believe our timekeeper as well is still in the meeting.
Excellent. And we have counsel who will be cross-examining as well. I see Mr. Sager. Very good. Let's proceed. Please call your first witness, counsel.
Okay. Sorry for that once again, Your Honors. At this time, the plaintiffs call Ms. Shiloh Pittsburgh to the stand.
Ms. Pittsburgh, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Pittsburgh.
Good morning.
Ms. Pittsburgh, are you familiar with an organization known as the Numerians?
Absolutely. I am a Numerian and have been for almost a decade now.
And what is the Numerians organization, Ms. Pittsburgh?
We believe in living a simple life and speaking out against greed, stuff like big pharmacy, big agriculture, and overall, we stand for world peace.
Objection, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 403, that testimony is far more prejudicial than it is probative. Any testimony regarding the beliefs of the Numerians has no probative value in today's case and only serves to prejudice the court into sympathizing with the plaintiffs.
And how does it prejudice?
Your Honor, these beliefs of being peaceful and world peace are sympathetic beliefs that would prejudice the court.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes.
Mock trial rule 404C. We're using this to as an element of our defense or claim. Now, I proffer that opposing counsel will attack the credibility of all of these witnesses and will try to paint out the plaintiffs and the Numerians as the aggressors in this scenario. Through this testimony, we are establishing that the Numerians are a peaceful organization. It is going directly to our defense under mock trial rule 404C.
So under 403, the probative value has to be substantially outweighed by the danger of prejudice. We will allow the testimony and give it the weight that it is due. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Pittsburgh, how do the Numerians get their ideas of world peace across to their audience?
We hold completely peaceful demonstrations to get our ideas out to other people who may believe them.
And what specifically is your role in the Numerians organization, Ms. Pittsburgh?
So I'm an accountant, which means I manage the funds for our organization, and I also allow them to use my accounting office as a headquarters, and sometimes I ghostwrite speeches or social media posts.
Ms. Pittsburgh, through the Numerians, did you ever meet a woman by the name of Professor Kai Cruz?
I did. We actually grew up together, so we're pretty close.
Do you know if Professor Cruz is in this courtroom this morning?
Yes, she is.
And through the Numerians, did you ever meet a man by the name of Eli Adam?
I did.
And do you know what Eli Adams' role in the Numerians is?
So Kai, firstly, was very, very good at inspiring other people to become passionate about our cause. And this frequently would gain support or even donations. And Eli Adam is one of those donors and a large spokesperson.
And is Mr. Eli Adam additionally in this courtroom this morning?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Now, Ms. Pittsburgh, I'd like to direct your attention to May 26th of 2019. Were there any Numerians demonstrations occurring on this date specifically?
There was. I was in attendance.
And who attended this demonstration with you, Ms. Pittsburgh?
I went with Kai, Eli, and Eli's mother, Nancy.
Now, is Miss Nancy Adam in the courtroom this morning?
Unfortunately, Nancy passed away just a few months after the events we're discussing.
Your Honors, at this time, I'd like to inform the court of stipulation number 7, which states that Nancy Adam has since passed away. And that is why the plaintiffs in today's case represent the estate of Nancy Adam and not Nancy Adam herself.
Thank you.
Ms. Pittsburgh, can you briefly describe if anything happened at this demonstration?
Yes, so we didn't really get as many people as we usually do, maybe because it was a holiday weekend, and the police were hanging around the demonstration as they usually do, even though they're always peaceful and we never become violent or aggressive.
Your Honors, at this time, I'd also like to inform the court of stipulation number 9, which states that the demonstrations held by the Numerians on May 26th of every year have always been peaceful. Okay. And did you spend the entire demonstration with the Adamses and Professor Kai Cruz?
Yes, I did.
When did you decide to leave this demonstration?
I left a little bit early because I wanted to try to avoid some of the traffic that had been going on that day.
And when you left, did anything unusual occur?
Yes, I was driving home on Route 3, and as I was driving, I came upon 2 police cars that were blocking my path.
So what did you do when you saw these police cars blocking your path on Route 3?
I pulled over, and when I got out of the car, I saw Eli and Nancy with their hands tied, and I could hear Kai in the distance.
Could you see how Kai Cruz was reacting to the whole scenario?
Yes, I saw Kai soon after, and Kai was yelling for help, looking very frightened.
And what about Mr. Eli Adam? How was he reacting to this entire scene?
Eli looked more scared than I've seen him in my life. It was a scene of complete chaos.
And what about his mother, Nancy Adam? How did she react to the scene?
Nancy just looked lost and confused.
At any point, did you see the police officers whose vehicles had been in the middle of the road?
There were a few police officers walking around the scene, but I didn't interact with anybody who was there.
Did you later interact with any of the officers?
I did. So I went back to the station after everyone was let go. And while I was sitting in the room waiting for them to get out, I overheard a conversation between Chief Mounty and an officer I later learned was named Officer Barman.
Do you know if either of these officers are in the courtroom this morning?
Yes, Officer Barman was in the courtroom.
And what was this conversation between Chief Wojciechowski or Chief Mounty and Lieutenant Barman about?
So Officer Barman said, "Let it go, Mountie. I'll make sure this doesn't look bad for us. The city can't afford a lawsuit."
And you're positive that this is what Lieutenant Barman said?
Yes, I'm positive.
Were you able to hear what Chief Wojciechowski responded with?
I tried to hear his response, but strangely, he was slurring his words very strongly, and I couldn't even make out what he was saying. There was also a strong smell of alcohol on his breath. He was acting as if he was intoxicated.
Ms. Pittsburgh, how long were the plaintiffs, your friends, at the police station before they were released?
They were there for several hours.
Thank you, Ms. Pittsburgh. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. So, Ms. Pittsburgh, good morning.
Good morning.
So, as you said on direct, you operate Eli Adams' social media pages, right?
Yes, I do.
And that would include his Twitter account?
Yes.
And you posted one tweet on December 28th of 2017. Do I have that right?
Yes, you do.
And that tweet said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but police officers should know what it's like to be persecuted themselves. Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So as you said, you operate the financials for the New Marion organization, right?
I do. I keep track of our funds.
And you'd agree that before Eli Adam joined, the New Marions had financial trouble, right?
We did. We had several donors before. Kai was pretty good at getting people inspired, but Eli was a real turnaround, not only because of his money, but because of his influence. And that combined with his strong beliefs got a lot more attention and support. So now we have a lot more people involved because of Eli's influence as a public figure.
But Miss Pittsburgh, you wrote in your statement that Eli Adams' contributions specifically were like a sea change for your organization, didn't you?
Yes, it was a pretty big change when we got those donations and Eli's spokesperson role.
All right, so let's go to May 26th. On that evening, as you said, you pulled over when you saw a pair of police cars, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And that's where you initially saw Kai Cruz.
No, I didn't see Kai when I first got out. I saw Eli and Nancy and I could hear Kai.
All right, so when you heard Kai Cruz, as you said on direct, he was yelling, wasn't he?
Yes, she was asking for help.
Right. In fact, she was yelling into a bullhorn. Do I have that right?
I didn't see her at that point, and I assumed that she was yelling into the bullhorn because of how loud her voice was. But the only people I saw when I first got out of the car, as it says in my statement, were Eli and Nancy.
But you'd agree, though, Kai Cruz was shouting into a bullhorn on May 26th, right?
Yes, in my statement, it says I heard the bullhorn.
Right. And you'd agree this occurred late at night, close to 11 p.m.
Yes, it was around 11 p.m.
So as you said on direct, when you saw the Adamses, both Eli and Nancy, they already had their hands tied, right?
Yes, they did have their hands tied.
So you didn't see what either of them had done beforehand to get arrested, did you?
That is correct. I understand that my testimony cannot speak on what happened leading up to the arrest, but I believe its value comes from the conversation I witnessed and the demeanor of the officers involved in this trial.
But just to be clear, Ms. Pittsburgh, you have no firsthand knowledge regarding Eli and Nancy Adams' arrests, do you?
That is true. I did not see the events leading up to their arrest.
You prepared your statement on May 29th, 2020, right?
Yes.
And you'd agree the incident occurred on May 26th of 2019, right?
Yes.
Ms. Pittsburgh, you wrote your statement more than a year after this incident took place, correct?
Yes, but as it was a pretty critical event, as my friends were involved with the police and there were high stakes things happening, the memory is very clear in my mind. And I assure you that all details in my statement are correct, aside from the part where I said I heard the bullhorn. As I said, I did not see Kai, and it sounded as if she was yelling into the bullhorn, but I couldn't see her.
But let's go to some of those things that you claim to recall. Now, at the end of your direct, you mentioned hearing Lieutenant Barman claim something about dropping the charges for fear of a lawsuit, right?
Yes, the conversation that I overheard was stated word for word. I know that my statement happened a while after the incident, but I did actually write down the conversation I overheard as soon as I got home. So the words are word for word what I overheard.
Okay, but Ms. Pittsburgh, you'd agree when you made this observation, you were walking out of the police station?
I was in the waiting room waiting for everybody to be released. So I did hear everything clearly, I assure you.
No, but you observed this conversation as you were walking out of the police station. That's what you wrote in your statement, wasn't it?
Yes, I don't think that the time I left the station is relevant to my ability to understand what words I am hearing.
Right, but you were walking out with the plaintiffs, right? Eli, Adam, and Kai Cruz.
Yes.
In fact, you wrote you were walking out together, right?
Well, they had just been released and we were leaving the station.
So that's a yes, you were walking out together.
Yes.
And despite that, Ms. Pittsburgh, you're the only one to claim that Lieutenant Barman said this, aren't you?
Well, I'm not sure if anybody else overheard the conversation, but if you're implying that I'm lying about what I overheard, I will remind you that I was just sworn in and I would not lie in a courtroom.
Ms. Pittsburgh, that wasn't the question. I'm only asking if you're the only one, to your knowledge, to have claimed to have heard this conversation. And you are, aren't you?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Pittsburgh, what did you mean by your tweet saying that police officers should know what it feels like to be persecuted?
So in that tweet, I was not wishing any harm on police officers. As I said, they should know what it feels like. That tweet was about empathy. I believe that officers in the force should understand the effects of their actions and that when they arrest people aggressively or maybe without probable cause, they should understand the effect that they may be having on the people they are arresting.
Ms. Pittsburgh, what was Professor Kai Cruz saying on the night in question at the scene?
When Kai was yelling at the scene loudly, she was asking for help. She was extremely scared.
Okay, Ms. Pittsburgh, why do you feel that your testimony is valuable here tonight or today?
I feel that if nobody says anything in these situations, that they will continue to happen and that we have an opportunity to speak out against these false arrests that are occurring. If we just let it go, it will continue to happen.
Thank you. No further questions.
Will plaintiff please call its next witness?
Your Honor, permission to recross?
As to the redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Has to be limited to the redirect. Please go ahead.
So, Ms. Pittsburgh, you mentioned on redirect that you claim your post was about empathy, but you did prepare a signed and sworn statement for court today, didn't you?
Yes.
And of course, you included all relevant information in that statement, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you included the contents of that tweet in your statement, right?
Yes, I thought it was relevant because I wanted to make it clear that that post was not Eli's opinion and it was me writing it for him. But again, even if it was Eli's opinion, which it is not, that post does not wish harm on any individual police officers. It is about a problem with the system and a problem with a lack of empathy. I think anyone in any job should have empathy for the people that their work affects.
Ms. Pittsburgh, that wasn't the question. I'm only asking if you wrote that statement, your tweet in your statement, and you did, right?
Yes, I did.
But you never mentioned that that tweet was about empathy or any of the things you just mentioned, did you?
Well, I didn't feel that it needed to be explained that I don't wish harm on the police force, but I would assume that that is what you're implying I meant by that tweet.
So that's a yes, you didn't include that in your statement?
I did not include that in my statement.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. The witness may conclude her testimony and we'll move on to the next witness.
Your Honors, at this time, the plaintiffs call Professor Kai Cruz to the stand.
To the witness, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir, I swear.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Professor Cruz.
Good morning.
I've introduced you as a professor, Ms. Cruz. Where do you teach?
At Metropolitan University.
And what do you teach at Metropolitan University?
Entomology. I love anything related to bugs.
Were you present in the virtual courtroom this morning when Ms. Shiloh Pittsburgh testified?
Yes, I was.
And did you hear Ms. Pittsburgh testify as it relates to the description of the Numerian Society?
Yes, I agree with everything that she said about the Numerians.
Ma'am, what is your role within the Numerian chapter for the City of Metropolitan?
I'm the fundraiser. I find donors that believe strongly in our cause and want to give to it, and I incorporate them into our organization.
Throughout your time fundraising for the Numerians, have you ever come in contact with an individual by the name of Eli Adam?
Yes, oh my gosh, Eli's my best friend.
When did you first meet Mr. Adam?
Oh, that must have been 5, 6 years ago now. That's crazy. It feels like I've known him for so long.
Ma'am, I'd like to direct your attention now to May 26, 2019. Do you recall this date?
Yes, I was at a Numerian demonstration that day.
And what happened at this Numerians demonstration?
Well, nothing in particular. We promoted our ideals of freedom and of peace.
Ma'am, did there come a point in time when you decided to leave this demonstration?
Yes, when it was starting to get pretty late at around 11 p.m., our chapter began to get a bit tired, especially Nancy, so we decided to leave. And because Nancy was tired, I decided that I would follow Eli home, who was driving her.
While you were following Mr. and Ms. Adam home that night, did anything out of the unusual occur?
Yes, it seemed like on the roadway we were going much slower than the speed limit because of the car in front of Eli. And so Eli tried to pass a couple of times, but it seemed like he never could.
And what happened after Mr. Adam was unsuccessful in passing this vehicle?
Well, he stopped in the middle of the roadway due to the car in front of him.
What did you do, ma'am, once Mr. Adam came to a stop?
Well, I braked as quickly as I could. I wasn't expecting him to stop, so I kind of dinged his bumper. So I got out of my car to make sure that he and Nancy were all right.
Ma'am, once you were out of your vehicle, besides Mr. Adam, was there any other person in the roadway that night?
Yes, after Eli confirmed that he and Nancy were all right, that was when I noticed this absolute mountain of a man get out of the vehicle in front of Eli.
What do you mean by mountain of a man?
He was huge, he was tall, and he was very intimidating due to his very displeased expression and his gait.
Your Honors, I'd like to make the court aware of stipulation number 4, which states that Chief Marcin Wojciechowski's height is 6 feet 6 inches tall. Professor Cruz, at this point in time, are you wearing any clothing items that would identify yourself as a Numerian?
Yes, I was wearing my t-shirt that says Numerians love everyone.
In addition, were any of the Adamses wearing anything that would identify themselves as Numerians?
Yes, Eli and Nancy were both wearing Numerian t-shirts as well, and Eli had the Numerian mask I'd given him.
What happened after this mountain of a man, as you described, came on scene?
Well, that was when he started over towards Eli and he started yelling.
What happened next?
Well, that was when I noticed Nancy exit the passenger side of Eli's vehicle and beeline for him. And one way or another, a tomato that was in her hand landed right in the middle of the guy's chest.
What happened after this tomato landed on this individual?
Well, he just got even angrier and he pushed Eli over.
What happened after this individual pushed your friend?
Well, I started to become a bit flustered. I'm not great with physical confrontation, so I grabbed the bullhorn that I had at my hip and I used it to say to the person to leave Eli alone.
And while you were telling this individual to leave Eli Adam alone, did anyone else arrive on scene?
Well, I guess so. Like I said, I was flustered and I guess I backed into a uniformed officer that had come up.
Did you purposefully back into this police officer?
Definitely not. I was focused on the scene in front of me and I wasn't looking behind me.
What happened after you accidentally bumped into this police officer?
They arrested me immediately.
Did you resist this arrest in any way?
No, I complied. I've been arrested many times at Numerian demonstrations before for not dispersing, so it was kind of like second nature to put my hands behind my back and do what they said.
After you were arrested, Professor Cruz, did you or Mr. Adam try to tell this responding officer what had happened?
Yes, we tried repeatedly to explain that Eli was the one who had been assaulted, but they didn't want to hear it. They were preoccupied.
What were they preoccupied by, ma'am?
A conversation with who I now know is Mountie and Nico Reed, and they were complaining about how the officers were at the demonstration and couldn't come for backup.
Ma'am, what happened after you were arrested and after the responding officer refused to listen to you and Mr. Adam?
Well, I was put in a squad car and brought back to the station where I was isolated for hours.
Ma'am, while you were back at the station isolated, were you ever presented with any charges?
No, I was never charged.
Have you ever been in a court of law regarding May 26, 2019 before today?
No, I haven't.
Ma'am, have you ever been charged with a crime by the city of Metropolitan?
No, despite being arrested multiple times, I've never been charged.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Miss Cruz.
Good morning.
Now, you live in Metropolitan, don't you?
Yes, I do. I'm very proud to be a Metrozen. It's such a great community.
And in Metropolitan, you attend demonstrations, true?
Yes, consistently. I try to get to as many of the demonstrations as I can. I feel so strongly in our cause, I want to express it to as many people as possible.
And Miss Cruz, at these demonstrations, sometimes you have been known to, and I quote, hurl well-deserved insults towards the police, haven't you?
No, ma'am, I've never insulted a police officer.
Well, Miss Cruz, you prepared a statement for court today, true?
Yes, ma'am, that is the case.
And you were under oath when you wrote this statement?
Yes, ma'am, of course.
And Miss Cruz, do you have access to this statement right now?
Yes.
I direct your attention to page 51, specifically lines 36 to 37. Please follow along silently as I read aloud. I swear, however, that none of us ever hurled anything at the cops except well-deserved insults. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, ma'am, that is what it states in my statement.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. And I would now like to discuss the events of May 26, 2019. You were yelling into a bullhorn on the side of Route 3 that night, true?
No, ma'am, that is not true. I was speaking. I didn't find it necessary to yell into the bullhorn. I only used it to be able to be heard by who I now know as Mountie over the sound of the cars that were going past the highway.
Miss Cruz, you were here for the Miss Shiloh Pittsburgh's testimony, true?
Yes, ma'am. And I did hear her say that she may have heard me yell into the bullhorn, but that was after I had already been detained. So of course I wouldn't have been able to yell into a bullhorn with my hands handcuffed.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. But regardless, you were utilizing this bullhorn at 11 p.m., true?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to make sure that the individual who I now know as Mountie would be able to hear me because I was so concerned for Eli. I wanted to make sure that he was safe and away from the really intimidating guy.
Ms. Cruz, I would now like to discuss the events before you used your bullhorn. You were driving on Route 3 after New Marion demonstration. Do I have that right?
Yes, and I was following Eli. I wanted to make sure that Nancy got there safe because she seemed so tired.
And it was while you were on Route 3 that you came to a stop, true?
Yes, I really didn't expect Eli to stop in the middle of the highway. Of course, it wasn't his idea. No one would want to stop in the middle of a roadway where the speed limit's 50 miles per hour.
Miss Cruz, once you were out of your vehicle, you noticed a large man, Mr. Wojciechowski, true?
Yes, I did notice him. I didn't recognize him at first, mostly because of his demeanor. I'd never seen him so angry.
Miss Cruz, it was after noticing Chief Wojciechowski that a tomato that Nancy Adam was holding hit him square in the chest. Do I have that right?
Yes, Nancy was obviously intimidated by Mountie, as I was as well, and she wanted to protect her son.
So, Miss Cruz, in your observations, this was an act of protection from Nancy Adam.
Objection,
Yes,
Your Honors. Pursuant to mock trial rule 602, this question calls on this witness to speculate as to Ms. Adams' state of mind. Professor Cruz may testify to what she perceived and eyewitnessed on the night of May 26, 2019. However, to ask why Ms. Adam threw the tomato would be speculating into the state of mind of Ms. Adam.
Any response?
Pursuant to Rule 602, my question was regarding Ms. Cruz's observations. Did she believe this was an act of protection? I am simply asking Ms. Cruz to answer to her own observations that night. In no way am I asking her to speculate to Nancy Adams' state of mind. I'm simply asking for her observations.
So the witness volunteered that this was an act of protection. Counsel is allowed to explore that. Objection overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So Ms. Cruz, in your observations, you believed that this was an act of protection, true?
Yes, she obviously recognized the threat that Mountie posed to her son's well-being, and she wanted to protect him.
Ms. Cruz, on direct examination, you said that Chief Wojciechowski pushed Eli Adam, true?
Well, I inferred that based on the fact that the way that they were facing and Eli doubling over afterwards, that could have only been the case.
So, Ms. Cruz, you never actually saw the chief make any physical motion towards Eli Adam that night, did you?
Based on the way that I was standing with the two individuals in front of me, it was a bit difficult to see exactly where Mountie's arms were, but I pieced together, I inferred based on my observations that he had to have been the cause for Eli to have doubled over.
So, Ms. Cruz, that's a yes to my question. You never saw the chief make any physical motion towards Eli Adam, did you?
I never saw the contact, but I did notice, based on my observations, that the only thing that could have happened was for have Mountie to have been the cause for Eli to go down.
So, Ms. Cruz, you're speculating to how Eli Adam doubled over because you never saw this action, true?
No, ma'am, I inferred.
Right, Ms. Cruz, you never actually saw Chief Wojciechowski make any physical motion towards Eli Adam, true?
That's correct, I inferred.
Ms. Cruz, you also never saw a gun at the scene, did you?
No, I never did.
Ms. Cruz, you have an eye condition called night blindness, don't you?
Yes, that is the case. Unfortunately, it's affected me a lot, specifically in my studies of insects, but in any other aspects of my life, it doesn't really affect me.
Right, it makes it more difficult to see in the dark, doesn't it?
Well, night blindness is only in regards to the fact of the lack of lighting. That's why it's called that. So that evening of the May 26th, I was actually able to see based on the headlights and based on the lights on the highway and the other passing cars. So it didn't detract from any of my recollection or my observations, but my night blindness totally affects me when it comes to bugs.
So, Ms. Cruz, with your night blindness in mind, you were still able to clearly see that tomato ruin the chief's shirt and jacket. Do I have that right?
Yes, definitely. Like I said, it only really affects me when it comes to bugs. I have to be able to distinguish the difference between the Chihanus crustaceus and the May beetle, and the difference is only half an inch. So that sort of little thing is difficult for me, but anything larger, it's not really a problem.
Thank you, Your Honors. No further questions at this time.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Professor Cruz, on cross-examination, opposing counsel presented you with your statement. Do you recall the line that opposing counsel cited?
I believe so. It was that none of us ever hurled at anything at the cops except well-deserved insults.
Ma'am, what did you mean by that statement?
I meant that I would never, of course, I'd never want to hurt anyone mentally or physically, but there are some fringe members of our organization whose beliefs only sort of align with the Numerians, and for some reason they find it necessary to insult the police officers, but the true Numerian would never.
On May 26, 2019, did you personally hurl any insults at responding officer Jamie Cada?
No, I would never. I was simply telling Mountie to leave Eli and Nancy alone, and then later I called for help, but I never insulted anyone.
Ma'am, why did you perceive that Marcin Wojciechowski pushed Eli Adam?
Based on the way that they were standing and based on the way that Eli fell afterwards, he wouldn't have done that for no reason. So just by the slight bit of his arm that I could sort of see, that was the only thing that I could infer.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Recross is limited in general, so I'm going to tell all counsel not to expect to do so unless they make a specific request for that. Please call your next witness.
Permission to recross, Your Honor.
All right, needs to be limited to the cross-examination, to the
Yes.
redirect, excuse me.
Now, Ms. Cruz, in your statement that Mr. Frey just regarded, you do use the word us, true?
Yes, in regards to the Numerians, of which I am a member, but it's only the fringe members, not true Numerians, that believe completely with our ideas.
But Ms. Cruz, you still grouped yourselves in with those fringe Numerians, true?
I grouped myself as a Numerian, but I believe myself to be a true Numerian, not someone whose beliefs only slightly align and want to cause any fuss or cause anything other than the peace that we strive for.
And Ms. Cruz, just to reiterate, you never saw Chief Wojciechowski actually shove Eli Adam. You never saw the contact, did you?
Correct. I never saw the contact, but I inferred based on circumstantial evidence.
Thank you, Your Honors. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Please call your next witness.
Of course, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiffs call Mr. Eli Adam to the stand.
Mr. Adam, do you swear the testimony you will present will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Adam.
Good morning.
Mr. Adam, were you present in the virtual court this morning when Ms. Shiloh Pittsburgh and Professor Kai Cruz testified?
Yes, I was.
Did you agree with their testimony as it relates to the Numerian Society?
Yes, I completely agreed with their testimony.
Mr. Adam, how do you know the previous witness, Professor Kai Cruz?
Well, I had first met Kai 5 or 6 years ago when she had actually accosted me in front of my house during a Numerians protest.
Did she physically accost you?
No, not physically, but she was certainly very passionate.
Mr. Adam, before meeting Professor Cruz, what was your view of the Numerian Society?
Well, I had used to believe a lot of the media lies that they were a bunch of crazies, but after joining, I had quickly realized that they were quite the opposite.
Mr. Adam, what led you to join the Numerian chapter for the city of Metropolitan?
I hadn't joined immediately after meeting Kai. It wasn't until a few years later when I had run into an incident with my anger issues leading to me being arrested. And I decided to join the Numerians and to fix myself.
And Mr. Adam, do you agree with Ms. Pittsburgh and Professor Cruz's description of the events at the Numerian rally on May 26, 2019?
Yes, I agreed with her description.
Mr. Adam, were you present at this Numerian rally?
I was.
And Mr. Adam, did there come a point in time when you decided to leave this rally?
Yes, I had actually left early because I realized my mother didn't take her medication for dementia, so I decided to take her home.
Mr. Adam, while you were taking your mother home to get medicine for her dementia, what, if anything, occurred?
Well, as I was driving home, there was a vehicle in front of me that was going quite slow under the speed limit, and it was starting to cause a line of cars to build up behind me.
Mr. Adam, are you aware of what the speed limit is on that stretch of road?
Yes, I believe it was 50 miles per hour, and we were traveling around 35 or less.
Your Honors, at this time, I'd like to make the court aware of stipulation number 5, which states the speed limit for Route 3 is 50 miles per hour. Mr. Adam, since this vehicle was going below the speed limit in your perception, what did you try to do?
Well, I had tried to pass, but it was a dark and curvy road, so I tried when I could. But every time I attempted to, the driver in front of me would swerve in front of me and slow down even more.
Mr. Adam, were you ever successful in trying to pass this vehicle?
No, I wasn't. Eventually, they had suddenly stopped right in the middle of the road, and I had nearly hit them, and Kai had actually hit the back of my car.
Once your vehicles came to a sudden abrupt stop in the middle of the road, what did you do?
Well, I quickly got out of the vehicle and I ran to the back of my car to make sure Kai was okay and to make sure there was no major damage to the vehicles.
And while you were out of your vehicle, could you tell if there's any other individual besides Professor Cruz in the roadway on that night?
Yeah, as I was talking to Kai, she looked behind me and had a look of fear as the driver of the vehicle got out, and that's when I saw who I now know as Mountie.
Did you know that it was Chief Wojciechowski at the time?
No, I did not recognize him at all.
Okay. Mr. Adam, what happened once Chief Wojciechowski appeared on scene?
Well, he got out of the vehicle looking very angry, and he marched over to me within arm's reach, screaming and yelling about insurance, even though there's no damage to the cars. And he poked a finger in my face and called me a crackpot Numerian.
Mr. Adam, what happened after Chief Marcin Wojciechowski called you a crackpot Numerian?
Well, that's when I smelled alcohol on his breath and knew that I was in deep trouble.
What happened next?
That's also when my mother started getting out of the vehicle. I guess out of concern for me, she might have seen him poke a finger in my face.
What, if anything, did your mother do when she was out of the vehicle?
I'm not sure, to be completely honest. She had a tomato in her hand, and I don't know if she tripped and fell and it went flying, or she decided to defend me. But the tomato went flying and had hit Mountie.
After this tomato hit Chief Wojciechowski, what was his response?
Well, he bellowed that he was a police officer, and I couldn't believe it because he was acting so out of character. I thought he was joking. So I threw a joke back saying that he should file for disability.
And after you said this joke, Mr. Adam, what happened next?
Well, he punched me.
What happened after Chief Marcin Wojciechowski, the Metropolitan Police Department, punched you?
I brushed it off and I quickly ran over to my mother to help her up off the ground.
And while you were helping your mom on the ground, what happened next?
Well, Mountie came over too, and he went to reach for a gun, and I didn't want someone intoxicated with a gun involved, so I defended my mother and I shoved him away.
Once you shoved the chief, did anyone else arrive on scene?
Yes, that's when Officer Cato had arrived, and they ran straight to Mountie and listened to his lies and wouldn't listen to me when I said that he had punched me and that he had a gun.
Did Officer Cato arrest you?
Yes, they arrested me, my mother, and Kai, even though we did nothing wrong.
Did you have any other conversation with any other member of the Metropolitan Police Department that night?
Yes, fortunately, I was able to talk to Barman, who said that I would never do something like that.
And are you talking about Lieutenant Barman?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Adam.
Good morning.
So you were here for the testimony of Shiloh Pittsburgh, right?
I was.
And you heard her say she claimed to have heard Lieutenant Barman say something about dropping the charges for fear of a lawsuit, right?
I did hear that claim.
But just to be clear, you never heard Lieutenant Barman say anything of that sort, did you?
No, I don't believe so. No, I'm not. I don't doubt though that Shiloh had heard that claim at the police department.
But you didn't, right?
No, I was not paying attention to the officers.
So let's go to earlier on May 27th or 26th. As you said on direct, you left the Numerian demonstration early, right?
Yes, I wanted to bring my mother home.
And that was because you had forgotten to give your mother her dementia medication, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So it's fair to say you were in somewhat of a rush going home, weren't you?
No, it was not urgent, but I did want to bring her home.
But Mr. Adam, you'd agree it was urgent enough that you had to leave the demonstration early.
Well, it wasn't urgent, but I decided to leave early. The demonstration was almost over regardless, so.
But the reason you left the demonstration was your mother's medication, wasn't it?
Yes, she was acting very unusual, so I mean, it wasn't urgent, but I decided to bring her home.
And on your way home, as you said, you came across a Ford Explorer that you claim was driving slow, right?
Yes, they were driving quite slow and recklessly too.
Mr. Adam, it's fair to say that that made you mad, didn't it?
I will admit I was reasonably upset, but I have control over my anger.
That's a yes. You were mad at the Ford Explorer in front of you.
Yes, it was reasonably upset, but not aggressive.
But you'd agree mad, right?
Not necessarily, just like upset.
Mr. Adam, you prepared a statement for court today, didn't you?
Yes,
Everything in this statement is accurate, right?
yes,
You were under oath when you wrote that statement, weren't you?
that is correct.
And in that statement, you wrote you were mad, didn't you?
And yes, and right after that, I had said that I used my deep breathing techniques to calm myself down.
All right, but you have been diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder, haven't you?
Yes, I was diagnosed about 3 years ago, but it's since then been resolved. Hasn't been an issue for years.
But a symptom of that was difficulty controlling your anger, wasn't it?
Yes, and I had no difficulty controlling my anger that night.
But the therapist that diagnosed you prescribed antidepressants to treat that disorder, didn't they?
Yes, the antidepressants actually gave me a migraine, so I took advice from a psychologist instead.
But the antidepressants did help you stay calm, right?
Yes, but like I said, they also had a side effect of migraine, so I decided that it'd be better for my well-being if I didn't use them.
So you weren't using them on May 26th?
No, I was using the techniques advised by psychologists that I talked to.
But I just want to be clear, the therapist that prescribed those antidepressants never recommended you stop taking them, did they?
No, but I believe that the psychologist I talked to is equal in profession.
But the therapist did not, right?
That is correct.
And afterwards, as you said, the cars came to a stop in the middle of the road, right?
It was a sudden stop, yes.
And you had gotten out of your car at that point, right?
Yes, I went to the back of my vehicle.
And you put on a Guy Fawkes mask?
I did have a mask on, yes. It was a New Marian's mask I typically like to wear.
And that was because, Mr. Adam, you didn't want to be recognized, did you?
That is true. I do not like to be treated differently because of who I am as a business person and my status as a New Marian. I wear the mask so I'm not treated differently.
Right. So as you said, your mother had a tomato on May 26th.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Adam, that tomato hit Chief Wojciechowski square in the chest. Isn't that right?
Yes, and I'm not sure what her intent was and if whether she had tripped and fallen, but I wish we could know, but unfortunately, Officer Cato never questioned Nancy.
Well, the tomato, it splattered all over Chief Wojciechowski's shirt, right?
Yes.
You'd agree you wrote it was covered in red, didn't you?
Yes.
And afterwards, it's fair to say you had a confrontation with Chief Wojciechowski?
Yes, well, Mountie had punched me after that.
And in response, Mr. Adam, you shoved him away, didn't you?
I didn't shove him in response to the punch. I shoved him after I was trying to help my mother up and he went to reach for a gun.
All right, well, regardless, after you punched him, you'd agree Chief Wojciechowski fell to the pavement, right?
It was after he went to reach for a gun and I defended my mother and I.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. After you shoved him, Chief Wojciechowski fell to the pavement.
Yes, and I'm not sure if it was because he was intoxicated and lost his balance, but I had defended myself that night.
But you agree on the chronology, though. You shoved at Chief Wojciechowski and then he fell, right?
No, Mountie had punched me, then went to reach for a gun, then I shoved him and he fell.
Great. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Adam, did your prior anger issues impact you on the night of May 26, 2019?
Not at all. My anger issues have not been a problem since 2017 when I was last arrested.
Mr. Adam, why were you not taking your antidepressants on May 26, 2019?
Because they gave me terrible migraines, and it was better for my well-being to take the advice from the psychologist I talked to.
Right. And Mr. Adam, why did you shove Chief Wojciechowski on the night of May 26, 2019?
Because I wanted to defend myself and my mother from the drunk guy with a gun, and I find it ridiculous that I was arrested after that.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Free cross, Your Honor.
Please go ahead.
So you just said you didn't feel your anger disorder flare up on May 26th, but you agreed you were mad under cross-examination, right?
Yes, I was reasonably upset, and I took those deep breathing techniques that my psychologist advised me.
And intermittent explosive disorder is an anger disorder, right?
Yes, and like I said, I haven't had issues with my IED since 2017.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel.
Your Honors, at this time, the plaintiff's rest.
Thank you. We'll proceed to the defense case. Judge Clark will be presiding.
Okay, thank you. Who is your first witness?
Defense calls Jamie Cato to the stand.
Okay. Jamie Cato? I'll swear Jamie Cato
Present, Your
in.
Honor.
Okay. Good morning. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. All right, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. Please state your name for the record.
Jamie Cato.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm a sergeant for the Metropolitan Police Department.
And how long have you been with the department?
Since 2015, so about 5 years, give or take.
And how long have you been a sergeant?
I was promoted in July of 2019, so going on 2 years now.
Sergeant Cato, could you please briefly describe your involvement with the police department?
Certainly. Well, I set the record for the most police actions, tickets, arrests, and whatnot. Others may sometimes let things slide and take the easy way out. I don't. The law is the law, and it's my duty to enforce it.
And Sergeant Cato, I would now like to discuss the events of May 26, 2019. What were you doing early that evening?
Well, I was on duty, making sure everyone was safe, doing my job.
Sergeant, you said you were on duty. Were you in uniform?
Yes, ma'am. I was in my uniform, all ready to go, except my body cam, as it was malfunctioning that night.
Well, Sergeant, how was it malfunctioning?
It just wasn't recording, ma'am.
And did you ever get your body cam fixed that night?
No, ma'am. There were more pressing actions, such as disorderly conduct downtown, and then I had to leave my post to respond to a call on Route 3.
And Sergeant, when did you leave your post to respond to this call?
Just after 11 p.m., I was responding to a 911 call. Road rage incident on Route 3 between exits 13 and 14.
And when you arrived at the scene of that call, what did you see?
When I arrived at the scene, I saw the chief with a giant tomato stain on his chest. Then he was kneeling on the ground. And on the roadway, I saw the 3 vehicles, each spaced out on the roadway.
Well, Sergeant, did you notice anybody else besides the chief?
I also saw the Adamses, Eli and Nancy, and Kai Cruz. I also saw Nico Reed a little later on as well.
And did you observe any of these individuals in conversation?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you overhear any of those conversations?
Yes. After I got out of my car, I heard Mountie yell real excitedly how he had just been hit.
Sergeant Cato, what had the chief been hit with?
A tomato. It was all over him.
And how did the chief appear to you?
Mountie looked like a complete mess. He was getting up off the ground, swiping all the dirt and debris off his shirt and pants, and like I said before, he looked like a Jackson Pollock paint with all that tomato all over him.
Sergeant, why was the chief on the ground?
He fell. I saw Eli Adams' arms reaching out towards him just before he fell too.
Sergeant Cato, you said Kai Cruz was there. Where was she in all of this?
Miss Cruz was holding a loud bullhorn yelling about dirty cops and whatnot. When I was trying to get close to the scene, she got directly in my way and called me an establishment stooge right in my face with the bullhorn. She almost elbowed me in the ribs too while she was at it.
How did you react?
I arrested Miss Cruz on charges of harassment.
And Sergeant, what did you do next?
Well, Manny Reed spoke to me, and then I arrested the Adamses on charges of simple assault.
And what did you do after performing these arrests?
Well, there were a lot of moving parts, ma'am. So I raided it into dispatch, and Lieutenant Bauman came.
And Sergeant Cato, you said you spoke to Miss Reed and Mr. Wojciechowski. What did they tell you?
Nico and Manny had filled me on what had happened, and we all went back to the station with the plaintiffs.
And when you got back to the station, what did you do?
When I got back to the station, I got working away at some warrant complaints, but I was later told by Chief Wojciechowski to start working on a summons. But Lieutenant Bauman told me to drop the complaint altogether.
Sergeant Cato, how did you make the decision to arrest Eli Adam on the night in question?
I made the decision to arrest Eli Adam for simple assault due to a shove that I believe I had witnessed.
And Sergeant Cato, what caused you to make the arrest of Nancy Adam that night?
I made the decision to arrest Nancy Adam on the charge of simple assault for the throwing of a tomato at Moss and Wojciechowski.
And Sergeant, how did you make the decision to arrest Kai Cruz?
I arrested Kai Cruz on charges of harassment due to the yelling into a bullhorn, causing an annoyance at a late hour.
And lastly, Sergeant Cato, did you take into account anything other than your own observations to make these arrests?
I took into account the accounts given to me by two eyewitnesses, Manny and Reed.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Sergeant
Good
Cato.
morning.
Sergeant Cato, you actually set a record in the Metropolitan Police Department for being promoted to sergeant with the least number of years, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you credit this promotion in part to your statistical record, as you had racked up the most arrests in the entire department.
Yes, ma'am. Tickets, arrests, a lot of my merit, ma'am.
Okay. And on May 26, 2019, you attended the Numerians demonstration with zip ties in order to be all ready to arrest Numerians, correct?
I attended the protest just in case if there was any crimes being committed, just in case any protesters got out of hand. So we had these zip ties.
My apologies, Sergeant Cato. You can continue with your answer.
So we have these zip ties in case we need to make multiple arrests, as each metropolitan officer is only issued one pair of handcuffs.
Okay. But your words were that you were all ready to arrest these Numerians?
Those are my words, but if you would read only 3 words later, you would notice that it would say at the protest. So I was implying that I would need to arrest protesters if any crimes were being committed, ma'am.
Okay. And you actually made 3 more arrests later that night by arresting the 3 plaintiffs, correct?
Well, these weren't at the protests, but yes, I did arrest 3 individuals that night.
Okay. And just to clarify, your promotion, which you credit to your number of arrests, was given to you after May 26th of 2019.
Yes, ma'am, it was, but I resent any insinuation that my arrests on that night had anything to do with that.
Okay. And Sergeant Cato, you stated on your direct examination that your body camera was malfunctioning on that night?
Yes, ma'am, unfortunately it was.
And you did not go back to the police station to replace your body camera, is that correct?
That's correct, ma'am. We were so busy that night, we were so short-staffed that I prioritized the public safety. And if I'm being honest here, I wish I did go back and get that body cam, because it'd back up everything that I'm saying right now, ma'am.
And exactly, is that body camera would show the most accurate account of what had happened on that night, correct?
It would back up everything that I'm saying, ma'am.
Okay. And when you were later at the station, you were told not to write an arrest report by Lieutenant Barman, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I was obeying an order from a high officer and the charges were dropped.
And you'll agree with me that an arrest report on the night in question, only hours after the incident, would be the second best account since you didn't have any visual recording of what had happened.
The second best account, no, I would disagree, ma'am.
Okay. But you never questioned this decision by Lieutenant Barman as to why you weren't writing an arrest report?
Well, ma'am, the charges were being dropped and I was obeying an order from a higher officer. So that's what you do in the police department under standard metropolitan protocol.
Okay. And this would have been a narrative police report that would have detailed everything that you saw on the night in question?
Correct.
Okay. In addition to not filling out narrative police reports, you were also told by Lieutenant Barman and Chief Wojciechowski not to file any warrants or summons, correct?
Correct, ma'am. The charges were dropped and I was obeying an order.
Yeah, and you never questioned this order from either of your superior officers?
Ma'am, you're supposed to do what you're told under metropolitan protocol. And I think those actions were justified that night.
Okay. And when you were at the scene, you were listening, you said in your direct examination that you spoke to Chief Wojciechowski and Nico Reed, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And your words on direct examination, correct me if I'm wrong, were that they filled you in on everything.
Yes, ma'am. They filled me in on what had happened. I really wanted to make sure and confirm what I had seen.
But not once in that night did you ever question or have a conversation with Eli Adam, Nancy Adam, or Kai Cruz about what had happened?
No, ma'am. There was no need to. I spoke to the first two witnesses that I spoke to, and they seemed to back up everything that I saw. I found them to be reliable, ma'am. So therefore, I didn't think any interviews of other eyewitnesses was necessary, ma'am.
But you'll agree with me that you didn't arrest Nancy Adam or Kai Cruz until after this conversation occurred.
Correct, ma'am. I wanted a fuller picture of what I had just seen, and I wanted to be extra sure of what I'm about to do.
And you'll agree with me that at no point on May 26, 2019, did you see Nancy Adam throw a tomato at Chief Wojciechowski?
Well, ma'am, I didn't see a tomato being thrown, but I know a tomato was thrown that night, ma'am, from my observations of the scene and through my interviews of eyewitnesses.
But this tomato being thrown, that was not in your presence, correct?
Ma'am, I did not see the tomato. However, in my presence, I did observe a very large tomato stain on Marcin Wojciechowski's chest.
Yes, and this was after a tomato had been thrown, correct?
Correct, ma'am.
Okay. And you arrested Professor Kai Cruz on charges of harassment, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you'll agree with me that harassment, the charges relate to the words of Professor Kai Cruz on the night in question, what she said.
No, I disagree completely.
But harassment is based on what she persuaded to you verbally?
No, not the contents of a speech, ma'am. What I arrested her for was because she caused a loud annoyance through speaking through a bullhorn late at night. It was 11 p.m., ma'am. That constitutes harassment.
You'll agree with me, Sergeant Cato, that there was a lot of traffic on this loud highway?
Yes, ma'am, and that's all the more reason. If you're distracting drivers, that creates a dangerous scene on the highway, especially with a loud bullhorn. You can distract the drivers on the highway and cause further danger to the incident.
Okay, but you'll agree with me that despite your claims of Kai Cruz yelling into this bullhorn and this loud traffic, you were able to hear Chief Wojciechowski yell, "I'm hit," correct?
Yes, ma'am. I was able to hear that he said that I'd been hit.
So is it your testimony here tonight that Chief Wojciechowski's statement of "I'm hit" was louder than the traffic and Kai Cruz, loud enough that you were able to hear it over both of those things?
Can you please repeat your question, ma'am?
Is it your testimony here tonight, Sergeant Cato, that the phrase "I'm hit" by Chief Wojciechowski on the night in question was loud enough for you to be able to hear it over what you claimed was Kai Cruz yelling into a bullhorn and this loud traffic on the side of the highway?
Well, ma'am, I can't really answer that question because those events of Kai Cruz yelling into a bullhorn and Marcin Wojciechowski yelling "I'm hit" happened at two completely different times, ma'am. For you to say that they happened at the same time is just simply not a matter of fact.
Okay. And you just to clarify one more time, you took crucial information from Chief Wojciechowski and former Officer Nico Reed on that being the identity of who threw the tomato.
Yes, ma'am. I aligned my observations with their accounts of the scene, and I found them to be reliable.
Okay. But never once did you witness Nancy Adam herself possessing a tomato, and you did not witness her throw this tomato.
No, ma'am, I didn't witness her throw a tomato or possess a tomato, but what I did see was a very large stain on Marcin Wojciechowski's chest.
So you took the information of the identity of who threw the tomato. Oh,
Time has expired.
My apologies. No further questions.
All right, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, thank you. The witness can be excused. All right, you can call your next witness.
Defense calls Tatum Barman to the stand.
Tatum Barman.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. All right, would you please raise your right hand to be sworn? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. You can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. Please state your name for the record.
Tatum Barman.
And what was your occupation on the night of May 26, 2019?
I was a lieutenant with the Metropolitan Police Department.
Lieutenant, could you please briefly describe your involvement with the department?
Sure, I had about 26 years of experience on the force. I was actually promoted to lieutenant a couple years back by the late Chief Wojciechowski.
Lieutenant, I would now like to discuss the events of May 26, 2019. What were you doing that evening?
Well, that night I responded to a call for backup from Sergeant Jamie Cato, and he was responding to a 911 call.
Lieutenant, I direct your attention to what has been marked as Exhibit A. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I believe I do.
And what is this document?
Well, this would be the transcript of the 911 call that we received on the night of the incident.
And is it a fair and accurate transcript of that call?
Oh, yes, it appears to be so.
The defense offers Exhibit A into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, it'll be entered into evidence. You can go ahead.
Lieutenant Barman, who was the first officer to respond to this call?
Well, that would be Sergeant Cato. He also made the arrests of Miss Adam, Mrs. Adam, and Miss Cruz.
And who was the lead officer on the case concerning these arrests?
Well, actually, I mean myself, the lead officer.
Lieutenant, why did you make yourself lead officer?
Well, usually the arresting officer, in this case, Sergeant Cato, would be made the lead officer. However, I believed in this case that I had slightly more experience in de-escalating the high tension situation that had occurred. So that's why I made myself the lead officer.
And Lieutenant, when you arrived on the scene, what did you see?
Well, I saw Mr. Adam and Mrs. Adam over to one side. Their hands were tied. I also saw over to the other side Miss Cruz. She was yelling, kicking at the ground.
Lieutenant Barman, had you ever met Mrs. Adam prior to the night in question?
Well, yes, I was acquainted with Mr. Adam, and actually Manji knew him as well. I mean, I was once introduced to each other a few years back.
And to your knowledge, when you introduced Mr. Adam to Mr. Wojciechowski, did they engage in conversation?
Well, yes, they did. In fact, this was at a holiday party a few years back at Eli's house himself, and I distinctly remember Manny was telling Mr. Adam all about his tricked out new Purple Interceptor Explorer.
Lieutenant, have you engaged in conversation with Mr. Adam?
Well, yes, I have spoken to Adam on multiple occasions. She's been saying things like police officers deserve to be knocked down a peg or two. She even refers to me as officer as if it's an insult to serve the city.
Lieutenant Barman, going back to May 26, 2019, what happened after you arrived at the scene?
Well, just as I arrived, the very same Adam directly confronted me, telling me, "You know who I am, uncuff me immediately and stop this insanity."
And how did you respond?
Well, I did pause and think about it. Mr. Adam is an important person in this city, but I did not submit to his demands, nor did I uncuff any of the other arrestees for that matter.
Lieutenant, what happened soon after?
Well, after that, we took the 3 arrestees back to the station where we were going to process them, but we ended up dropping the charges altogether, so we let them all go home.
And how was the decision made to drop the complaints on all 3 plaintiffs?
Well, I was the one who originally told Mountie that the mayor had wanted the charges to be dropped on the 3. Now, I wasn't able to get that order directly from the mayor, but I'm fairly well acquainted with the situational protocol in these kinds of situations. I also believe that that is what the mayor would have wanted to have done, and so I acted accordingly and made the decisions.
Lieutenant Barman, were you here for the testimony of Miss Shiloh Pittsburgh?
Well, yes, in fact, I was.
And did you hear Miss Pittsburgh's allegations of what you told the chief at the station?
Yes, I did hear those claims.
Well, Lieutenant, did you say Miss Pittsburgh is alleging you told the chief?
Not at all, ma'am.
Lieutenant Barman, could you please tell the court what you told Mr. Wojciechowski at the station that night?
Well, I simply reminded Mountie in my own office that there is money in the budget for lawsuits, and I simply reminded him of that because I was worried that these specific arrestees might misconstrue the events of that night.
Lieutenant Barman, did any officers ever assess the scene that night?
Well, actually, I did myself. I have prior experience in accident reconstruction, so I did assess the scene, the cars, and the surrounding area, just doing my duty.
Did you find anything of importance?
Unfortunately not. I did try to look for skid marks and other clues that would have helped me reconstruct the scene, but unfortunately I wasn't able to find anything of importance.
Lieutenant Barman, why did you search for skid marks specifically amongst these other clues?
Well, actually, that's because Adam and Cruz both claimed that they brake very quickly that night, and that so did Mounty in front of them. If I had seen skid marks on the road, I would have taken that as proof of their accounts. However, since I did not find anything, I personally cannot attest to the veracity of their recollections of that night.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Okay, Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Lieutenant Barman.
Good morning.
Now, on direct examination, you stated that you did have a conversation with Chief Wojciechowski that night regarding a lawsuit, correct?
That's correct.
And you heard on direct examination, you heard the testimony of Miss Shiloh Pittsburgh, where she claimed that she heard this conversation.
As I said on direct, I did hear those claims.
And as a police officer, you know that the best defense in a lawsuit would be to have all of your records together, correct?
Well, I'm not really sure about how to proceed with case proceedings and all that.
But you could imagine that the best defense in a lawsuit would be having all of your records together, correct?
Well, I'm not sure. Again, I'm not an attorney. I don't work with the law often. I'm just a police officer.
Okay. And you were the lead officer in that case, so therefore the records would be under your control, correct?
Well, as lead officer, I generally make decisions about how to proceed with the case. I believe the court records are managed by some cops over at the station.
Okay.
Or sorry, not court records, my apologies. Arrest records.
Okay. But as the lead officer, you ordered Officer Cato not to write an arrest report.
Well, he was working on his report, but I told him that he didn't have to finish it. I mean, we just dropped the case. It was about 2:30 in the morning. He didn't have to finish a report on a case we just dropped.
So you knew that there was a potential for a lawsuit, and yet you told Officer Cato not to write a narrative police report, which would have been the best account of what Officer Cato had seen that night.
Well, we did compose affidavits for this case. That would be about the same as what a narrative police report would entail.
But you'll agree with me that some of these affidavits were recorded months after the incident, as opposed to the night in question.
Well, I don't know when the other affidavits were composed, but I composed mine approximately 3 days after the case, after the arrest, that is.
Excuse me one moment. The chief just did a message. We're getting a little bit of feedback.
Excuse me?
We seem to be getting a little bit of feedback. Ms. Caravan, is that coming from, you were slightly breaking up. I could understand everything you were saying, but.
I can try to mute myself and we can continue talking to see if it's my computer or.
Sure, okay, sure. And we're on a time stop, okay.
Defense's witness, do you have anyone else also on there with you or in the same room as you listening? Because that could be where the feedback's coming from. Usually if there's two computers in the same room doing the same thing, you're going to get that feedback.
No, there's no other computers in this room with me.
I'm alone.
Okay, because I do believe the feedback is coming from defense's witness.
Would you like me to mute whenever the
that would be
Ms.
helpful.
Caravan?
That will eliminate the feedback on your end, yes.
All right, thank you.
All right, so what are we doing? You're going to mute when the attorney is speaking?
Yes, that is what's going to happen, Judge Clerk.
Okay, is that going to interrupt your flow between you? Because I don't want to do that.
I mean, I have no issues with it if that is the best way to solve the issue with the feedback.
Okay, all right, then why don't we do that? Thank you.
As long as the witness can quickly unmute when responding, I think the flow should be fine.
Okay.
All right.
And everybody relax. This doesn't affect anything. We just want to make sure we can fully hear everybody. Okay, go ahead.
Completely understandable, Your Honor. Okay. And Lieutenant Barman, you conducted an investigation about this incident, correct?
Well, yes, that's correct. I conducted an investigation of the scene that night.
And this was based off of the claims that Eli Adam and Kai Cruz made to you that Mountie was engaging in what they described as a rolling block.
Well, I did hear those claims of a rolling roadblock, and I did investigate the scene for any evidence I could find of sudden braking, but unfortunately I found none, so I cannot personally attest to what happened that night.
But you'll agree with me, the rolling roadblock, in addition to slowing down in the lane of travel, would also indicate that Chief Wojciechowski was swerving out of the lane of travel, correct?
Well, a rolling roadblock is simply a method that was used by police officers before it was outlawed to slow down vehicles. That's correct.
And part of this method is to swerve over towards the center of the highway to slow down and prevent vehicles from passing.
Well, yes, part of the method is to prevent the vehicle from speeding. So
And-
whatever that entails.
And specifically, Eli Adam described to you that Mountie was straddling the center lane of the highway, correct?
Well, yes, again, that's what Eli Adam claims. Again, a rolling roadblock is just a method used by, or was used by police officers to stop vehicles on the highway from speeding. That's all.
Okay. But when you arrived at the scene, you actually did find Chief Wojciechowski's car over the solid center line of the highway, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you didn't take any pictures of what you had seen, including this car being over the center line.
Well, I didn't take any pictures that night because there was no relevant physical evidence that I believed would help in this case.
So you didn't believe that Chief Wojciechowski's vehicle being out of a lane of travel was relevant enough evidence to take pictures?
No, again, since I was not able to come to a conclusion about how the cars were stopped, because I was not able to collect any physical evidence, I believe that I didn't want to speculate on that.
But once again, physical pictures would be a good account of what had occurred.
Again, I don't believe so. That's why I took no pictures that night.
Okay. And you are required to perform an accident reconstruction report for any accident that is reported to you, correct?
Well, that would be the standard protocol, yes.
But you'll agree with me that you did not perform a accident reconstruction report for this incident?
Oh, no, we did not file an accident reconstruction report. Again, this case was dropped, so we didn't believe it was necessary.
But it's required for all accidents that are just so much as reported to you, correct?
Well, that's the usual protocol, but we didn't feel it was necessary. Again, this was linked to this case and we dropped the charges, so I didn't believe it was necessary.
Okay. And on your direct examination, you talked about Eli Adam saying to you, "You know who I am, arrest me immediately," or uncuff me immediately. My apologies.
Well, yes, as I arrived on the scene, that was Eli Adams' words to me.
And you actually stated yourself that you would have uncuffed Eli Adam if not for your chief not having taken his deep breaths yet, correct?
Well, as I arrived on the scene, I saw Eli Adam in handcuffs, and now Eli Adam is a person who has the potential to incite considerable tension between the public and the police department. So it's generally not the protocol from a PR standpoint to arrest these kinds of high tension individuals. However, when I noticed a Mountie, I realized that I did not fully comprehend the gravity of the situation, and that's why I chose not to uncuff Eli then.
Okay, so the answer to my question is yes. The reason why you did not uncuff Eli Adam was because Mountie hadn't, quote, taken those deep breaths yet.
Exactly, because I realized that I did not comprehend the gravity of the situation after observing Mountie, and that's why I decided I would make a decision at a later time once I'd gathered the full evidence.
And when you did make this decision to let Eli, Kai Cruz, and Nancy Adam go, you actually had to do this by lying to Chief Wojciechowski.
Well, I don't believe that it was a lie. It was just an attempt to speed up the process in an inevitable process.
But you'll agree with me that you told Chief Wojciechowski, the mayor told you to let Eli Adam, Nancy, and Kai Cruz go.
That's correct. Again, I wasn't able to reach out directly to the mayor because she was asleep, I'm assuming. But again, it would be an inevitable process, and I didn't want to delay this for no reason.
So your testimony here tonight is that you told Chief Mountie that the mayor told you to let them go, but you had not even spoken to the mayor at this point?
Again, I hadn't spoken to the mayor directly, but I'm fairly well acquainted with what would be done in this situation. I believed I knew what the mayor would have wanted, and that's why I made the decision to carry along this process without fully consulting with the mayor.
Okay. And Lieutenant Barman, other than your affidavit, my apologies, I run out of time.
Okay, we're done. All right. Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Okay.
Lieutenant Barman, why did you tell Sergeant Cato that it was not necessary to file his report that night?
Well, again, it's not very common to drop a case on the same night that it is filed. I didn't believe that it would be worth Sergeant Cato's time to keep him up awake very early in the morning filing this police report that was not necessary, as we had just dropped the case.
Lieutenant Barman, why could you not conclude that a rolling roadblock was used by Chief Wojciechowski that night?
Again, I wasn't able to conclude anything from my investigation because I did not find any skid marks, any signs of heavy braking. That's why I was not able to conclude what had happened to result in those cars coming to a stop.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Any recross based upon redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Okay. Lieutenant Barman, is it because of your orders that Officer Cato did not file or did not fill out a narrative police report that would have described all of what he had witnessed on the night in question?
Well, I told Cato that he would not have to complete that report if he didn't want to. I'm sure I believe he made the choice not to complete it, and that's totally fine because we didn't need that report after we just dropped the charges.
Thank you, Lieutenant Barman. And when you arrived at the scene, you saw Chief Wojciechowski's car over the center line, the solid center line of the highway.
That's correct.
And this corroborated what Eli Adam and Kai Cruz had told you, which was that Mountie was straddling the center line of the highway.
Again, I don't want to speculate as to how the cars came to a stop because I was not able to conclude anything from my investigation of the scene.
Lieutenant Barman, I was not asking you to jump to any conclusions. I was simply stating, does this match up with what Eli Adam and Kai Cruz described to you? Which the answer to that question would be yes, correct?
Well, I believe that it does corroborate that, yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. The witness is excused. Okay. And you call your third witness?
The defense calls Nico Reed.
Okay. Nico Reed?
Yes.
I don't see Nico Reed yet. Let's see.
Ms. Reed, why don't you say something and then you'll pop up on the screen.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Reed. Now, what is your current?
Just wait 1 second. I haven't sworn Ms. Reed. I still don't see her. It's okay. We'll just.
Can you see me?
I'm sorry?
Can you see me? My video is.
I can now. Okay. Would you raise your right hand, please?
Yes.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can put your hand down. All right, counsel, you can proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Reed. Now, what is your current occupation?
Well, I'm a car mechanic right now, but I used to be a police officer.
If it's all right, I'd like to talk a little bit about Marcin Wojciechowski. Now, how do you know him?
Well, I met Chief Wojciechowski, or Mountie as I called him, on a hike a few years back. And then he actually helped me get my job at a Metropolitan Police Department, but that was before he was promoted to chief.
And after his promotion, could you describe his role in the department?
Sure, Mountie was the chief of the department, so he was the face and the spokesperson. He was always all over the local news, doing press conferences and things like that.
And what was your relationship with Chief Wojciechowski as of May 26, 2019?
We were really close friends, we'd worked together, we'd hiked together. He was like a second father to me, and I still can't believe that he's gone.
Ms. Reed, I am very sorry for your loss. I do have a few more questions on the topic, though. So on May 26, do you recall the events of that evening?
Yeah, I do. Mountie and I were at a Memorial Day party, and then we ended up driving home together that night.
And at that party, did you or Chief Wojciechowski have anything to drink?
Well, I had something to drink, and the chief really only had one drink throughout the entire evening. He was just being social, but that was it, just the one.
And you mentioned you were driving home together. Why was that?
Well, you see, I'd been in a pretty bad mountain climbing accident prior to this. So my neck was in a cervical collar. I had sustained injuries to my arm, and I was just physically unable to drive. So Mountie offered to take me.
And what kind of car was the chief driving you home in?
Oh, well, Mountie was driving his Ford Explorer, a car that he actually bought from the Metro PD.
Miss Reed, did that car have any distinctive features?
Yeah, the car itself was painted purple. As a mechanic, I'd gotten under the hood of that car plenty of times. It was a really old police car with a sweet engine, and it also said support police on the license plate.
All right, back to May 26th. Were there any other cars on the road near you that evening?
Yeah, there was this one car, a Mini Cooper, and it was tailgating us on the drive home, actually.
And did the driver of that car do anything in particular?
The driver was flashing his lights and honking his horn continuously, and Mountie had said that they'd given us the middle finger.
And what happened after that?
We heard a bang, like something had hit the car, actually. And then when I was looking at the Explorer, I saw a dent in that spot that I'd never seen before, which was strange.
And did Chief Wojciechowski take any action in response to hearing that thud?
Yeah, he did. Mountie called 911.
Ms. Reed, I direct your attention to Exhibit A, already in evidence. Could you identify that document?
Yeah, this is the transcript of Mountie's 911 call.
And did you hear the chief's statements he made in this transcription?
Yeah, I did. I was in the car with him.
Ms. Reed, could you please read the transcription of those statements for the court?
Sure. It says, the chief here, officer in need of immediate assistance. Crazy driver of a Mini Cooper just hit the back of my car with an object. We're driving on Route 3 near exit 15 southbound.
And Ms. Reed, after making that phone call, what did Chief Wojciechowski do?
Mountie started doing deep breathing exercises, to calm himself down. And at that point, he slowed down to park and then eventually got out of the car.
And after that, what did you do, Ms. Reed?
Well, I started to get out of the car, but I hesitated, because of the injuries I had. And I ended up staying in the car, actually.
And did the driver of the Mini Cooper get out of their car?
Yeah, I saw a man in a Guy Fawkes mask that covered his face get out of his car.
And did that man do anything in particular?
Yeah, I now know that was Eli Adam, and he was screaming, you don't know who you're messing with. And then he called Mountie a fascist pig. Mountie just responded that, he was a police officer, that he wasn't trying to harm anyone.
So, Ms. Reed, besides the chief and Eli Adam, was there anybody else at the scene?
Yeah, Kai Cruz was there, and so was Mr. Adams' mother, Nancy Adam.
And what was Kai Cruz doing?
She said that she'd hit Mr. Adams' car.
And what about Nancy Adam? Did you see what she was doing?
Yeah, Nancy Adam ducked into her car. She came out with a tomato and then she threw it at Mountie.
Ms. Reed, did you see Nancy Adam throw that tomato?
Yes, I did. I clearly saw it.
What happened after that?
Mr. Adam made a comment about them getting first blood. And at that point, Nancy Adam had fallen and the chief crouched down to her level.
Now, did you hear Eli Adam claim that Chief Wojciechowski was reaching for a gun?
I mean, I heard him say that.
Ms. Reed, did you ever see the chief reach for his firearm?
No, he never did. As I said, all he did was crouch down after Nancy Adam had fallen.
And lastly, Ms. Reed, after Sergeant Cato arrived at the scene, what did he do?
Well, he spoke to Mountie and I, and then he arrested Eli Adam, Nancy Adam, and Kai Cruz.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Reed.
Good morning.
Ms. Reed, as you testified on direct examination, you consumed alcohol on the night of May 26, 2019, correct?
Yeah, I had a little to drink while I was at the Memorial Day party.
And in addition to consuming alcohol, ma'am, you also were taking prescription muscle relaxers, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Because of the severe injuries I had, the muscle relaxers really helped.
And ma'am, you agree with me that the combination of alcohol and muscle relaxers actually made you feel woozy on the night of May 26, 2019, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I was feeling a little bit woozy that night.
Okay. And ma'am, you'll agree with me that this party that you and Chief Wojciechowski were at was at the Mighty Pint Bar, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That was the bar that we were at.
And you'll agree with me that you and Chief Wojciechowski were regulars at this bar.
Yeah, that's correct. We would go there every once in a while, and that was a place we liked to hang out.
And ma'am, you agree with me that Chief Wojciechowski was your designated driver on the night of May 26, 2019, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Because as I said, I couldn't drive because of my injuries, and so the chief offered to take me.
You'll agree with me, ma'am, that the common parlance of a designated driver is that that person refrains from consuming alcohol.
Yes, that's correct. Or that the person is just, not completely not intoxicated or doesn't have a lot to drink at all.
But ma'am, you'll agree with me that Chief Wojciechowski did consume alcohol on the night of May 26, 2019, didn't he?
I mean, as I said, all he had was the one drink that he nursed throughout the entire event.
But ma'am, you're the only person throughout today's virtual court who can testify to how many drinks Chief Wojciechowski had. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct, because I was at the bar with him that night.
Okay, and ma'am, you'll agree with me that Eli Adam was correct when he testified that Chief Wojciechowski was carrying a gun on the night of May 26, 2019.
Yeah, well, Mountie usually carried a handgun, strapped to his calf because he was a police officer.
And you'll agree with me that that gun was concealed, correct?
Yeah, as I said, it was on his calf and he was wearing long pants.
So you agree with me that the only way that Mr. Adam would know that Chief Wojciechowski had a concealed firearm was if Chief Wojciechowski brought it out.
I mean, I really don't know how Mr. Adam could have gotten this information. I wouldn't like to speculate as to what Mr. Adam knew about Mountie at all. However, I suppose the calf is a pretty common place to keep a firearm.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. And so, Ms. Reed, it's your testimony to the court that Chief Wojciechowski was operating a motor vehicle and carrying a firearm after consuming alcohol on the night of May 26, 2019.
Yes, that's correct. But as I said, the chief was completely sober. I mean, I would not have gone into the car with him had I not thought that he was in full control.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. And Ms. Reed, as you testified in direct examination, you are a former member of the Metropolitan Police Force, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Currently now I'm a car mechanic, but I did used to be a part of the police force.
And ma'am, while you were part of the police force, you were supposed to be suspended for falsifying payroll records. Are you aware of that?
No, I was not aware.
Are you aware, Ms. Reed, that the only reason why you were not suspended by Lieutenant Barman was because the then Chief Marcin Wojciechowski intervened on your behalf?
No, I was not aware. The only thing that really happened across with my career was a warning that I did get issued by Sergeant Barman, but I had no idea I was going to be suspended.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Ms. Reed, I'd like to draw your attention back to Joint Exhibit A, and I'd like to ask you to retrieve it, if you would, please.
Yes.
Ms. Reed, you agree with me that in this 911 phone call, Chief Wojciechowski places the location of you and the chief on Route 3 near exit 15 southbound. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you agree with me that Officer Cato finds the vehicle between exits 13 and 14 on Route 3?
Yes, that's correct.
And ma'am, as a former member of the Metropolitan Police Department, I take it that you were aware of what a rolling roadblock is.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I haven't been a police officer in a few years, but I do remember something about a rolling roadblock.
Ma'am, and you agree with me that a rolling roadblock is when a vehicle deaccelerates while serpentining in the roadway in an attempt to stop the vehicle behind it from passing.
I mean, I really don't know the specifics of a rolling roadblock that well. I've never performed one, and that was never my job on the police force, so I'm really not sure.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Reed. And Ms. Reed, you agree with me that Chief Wojciechowski did not allow the Mini Cooper that was being driven by Mr. Adam to pass him on the night of May 26, 2019.
Well, I mean, Mountie pulled over. We'd assumed that the car would pass, but the car just stopped right behind us.
Ma'am, were you present in the virtual court when Mr. Eli Adam testified?
Yes, I was.
Were you also present when Lieutenant Barman testified?
Yes.
And did you hear both of those witnesses, one from the plaintiff's side and one from the defense side, testify that Chief Wojciechowski's vehicle was over the solid center line in the middle of the highway?
Yes, I was. You see, that road had a really small shoulder that was kind of covered. And so really Mountie just stopped where he could, he pulled over slightly to the middle so that cars on the other side could still pass around us.
So you'll agree with me, ma'am, that Chief Wojciechowski stopped right over the solid center line in the middle of Route 3.
As I said, the chief pulled over and stopped where he could.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Ms. Reed, you'll agree with me that Chief Wojciechowski has a temper, correct?
Objection,
Yeah.
Your Honor. This calls for character evidence pursuant to Rule 404A. Any testimony regarding Mr. Wojciechowski's character trait of having a temper is inadmissible to show conformity.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah.
Pursuant to mock trial Rule 404C, I am offering this as character and character trait in issue. Use of a person's character or trait of character is admissible when that character or trait is an element of a claim or defense. It is the plaintiff's claim that the Chief Marcin Wojciechowski had a temper and that temper caused him to act irrationally on the night of May 26, 2019.
All right, I'm going to allow it. It's his demeanor, temper, whatever word you might use, has been raised in other witnesses' testimony, so we can explore it here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Reed, you'll agree with me that Chief Wojciechowski does have a temper?
I mean, to a certain extent, I suppose, yes, but he really had that temper under control through specifically breathing exercises that he learned.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. And Ms. Reed, you claimed on direct examination to see everything, correct?
Yes.
But you'll agree with me, ma'am, that you were inside the Chief Wojciechowski's vehicle up until the point that the 3 plaintiffs were detained, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But luckily, I was able to see everything through the mirrors.
But ma'am, you weren't out into the roadway, correct?
Not until later in the incident, after Nancy Adam threw a tomato at the chief, I realized that I had to get out of the car and try to help Mountie.
Thank you, ma'am. But you were wearing a hard cast on your arm and a neck collar, correct?
Yeah, as I said multiple times, I had sustained these injuries.
And you'll agree with me that if there was a neck collar around your neck, that would limit the amount that you could turn your head, correct?
Yeah, to a certain extent it did.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. But you see my time has expired. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Fry was asking about where you were when you made these observations. So could you describe how you saw Nancy Adam throw the tomato?
Yeah, sure. When I opened the door slightly, Nancy Adam actually came into view in that side mirror. And I was clearly able to see her reach into the car and come out with the tomato and then throw it through Mountie. And then I actually saw the tomato hit Mountie through the rear view mirror.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross based upon redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
Sure.
Ma'am, you just testified that you were able to clearly see Ms. Adam throw a tomato, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
But ma'am, you'll agree with me that your ability to move your head was restricted by this neck collar that you were wearing.
Yeah, but I was able to, see it through by shifting my glance to the mirror.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. I believe that was your final witness. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense rests.
All right, defense rests. I believe there's a brief recess now prior to summations. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So are we turning off or technical assistance? How are we going to just handle the next 5 minutes?
Judge Clark, this is Sheila.
Hi.
We would like the students who are writing the closing arguments to please remain on screen, and we'll resume in 5 minutes.
Okay,
Ms. Burrow, can you send Judge Clark and me into another room?
I'll ask our Zoom tech now to move you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sheila Boro. The judges have asked if the teams are ready now for their summations. Are you both ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
The defense is ready.
Okay, thank you. The judges will be in shortly.
Are we back?
Yes, we are.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead. Go ahead, Judge.
All right, we'll resume. Are the attorneys back?
Yes,
Yes.
Your Honor.
Okay. All right, we're now going to be hearing your summations. Under the rules of court, the defense proceeds first with the summation. And if there are any objections, I will rule on them. Okay? So, all right, the defense can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court and opposing counsel. Now, throughout today's trial, you've heard how the plaintiff and the defense agree on most of the factual evidence presented here today. The plaintiff doesn't dispute that Eli Adam shoved Chief Wojciechowski. They don't contest that Nancy Adam possessed a tomato which hit the chief, nor that Kai Cruz was shouting into a bullhorn late at night. But what the defense disputes is the unreasonable and unfounded claim that Sergeant Cato lacked probable cause to make these arrests. You heard multiple eyewitness accounts about how Eli Adam instigated this altercation and shoved the chief. Kai Cruz and Eli Adam, the plaintiffs, told you about the large tomato stain on Chief Wojciechowski's chest caused by Nancy Adam. Kai Cruz admitted that she was using a bullhorn late at night. Because the fact of the matter is, as my co-counsel told you just a few hours ago, the plaintiffs were the ones to instigate this altercation. They escalated it, and they have no one to blame for their arrests but themselves. Now, as the court is aware, in today's trial, it is the plaintiff that bears the burden of proof. This means they must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Sergeant Cato lacked probable cause to make these arrests and that the offenses did not occur in his presence. And probable cause doesn't require certainty. It only requires reasonable ground for belief that the offenses had been committed. And throughout today's trial, the defense has not only shown that Sergeant Cato did have probable cause, but that these offenses undoubtedly occurred and in the sergeant's presence. See, it's important to remember that Eli Adam, Kai Cruz, and Shiloh Pittsburgh all have animosity towards the police. Remember how Lieutenant Barman told you Eli Adam thought police officers should be knocked down a peg or two. Kai Cruz told you the Numerians would hurl well-deserved insults towards the police at demonstrations. And Shiloh Pittsburgh told you she posted on Eli Adams' social media page that police officers should know what it's like to be persecuted. Now, that animosity explains the plaintiff's aggressive behavior on May 26th. You see, on that evening, Nico Reed told you how Chief Wojciechowski and herself were driving home from a Memorial Day party when they were being tailgated by a Mini Cooper. The driver of that car, Eli Adam, who had been diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder, repeatedly honked his horn and flashed his lights. But why would Eli Adam harass the car in front of him like this? Well, you see, he knew it was driven not just by anybody, but by Chief Wojciechowski. Remember Lieutenant Barman's testimony when he told you the chief and Eli Adam had met in December of 2017. And when they met, the chief told Mr. Adam about his distinctive car, a car that was painted purple, a car that was a former police utility vehicle, and a car that said, "Support the police" on the rear license plate. So when Eli Adam recognized the car in front of him as belonging to the chief, he continued to instigate a conflict when he threw an object at the car. Miss Reed told you how both Chief Wojciechowski and herself heard a loud thud coming from the rear of the car. And when Miss Reed later examined the Explorer, she found a dent right underneath the rear windshield. And it was at that point that Chief Wojciechowski dialed 911. And you saw the transcript of that call. You saw how the chief told the dispatcher that the driver behind him had hit his car with an object. And afterwards, Miss Reed told you how Chief Wojciechowski pulled to the side of the road. Now, the plaintiff claims he slammed on his brakes, but remember Lieutenant Barman's testimony when he told you there were no skid marks to be found at the scene. No skid marks means no aggressive braking. And following the cars coming to a stop, Eli Adam, Kai Cruz, the Chief Wojciechowski had all gotten out of their vehicles. And the plaintiff asserts that Sergeant Cato didn't have probable cause to arrest Eli Adam for simple assault. But as I told you earlier, the plaintiff and the defense agree that Eli Adam shoved the chief. Mr. Adam claimed self-defense, that he was acting in self-defense because Chief Wojciechowski had punched at him and he was reaching for a gun. But the three other eyewitnesses at the scene, Sergeant Cato, Nico Reed, and the plaintiff, Kai Cruz, all told you they never saw Chief Wojciechowski ever punch at Mr. Adam, reach for a gun, or make any aggressive action towards him. And despite that, Eli Adam told you he put his hands on the chief and shoved him. Mr. Adam shoved him so hard, the 6'6" police chief fell to the pavement. And that constitutes simple assault. The plaintiff asserts that Nancy Adam the plaintiff agrees that Nancy Adam possessed the tomato which hit Chief Wojciechowski square in the chest. But they never provided any alternate explanation besides that it was a purposeful throw. Remember Nico Reed's testimony when she told you she saw Nancy Adam deliberately reach back into that car, grab the tomato, and throw it at the chief. Kai Cruz told you that it was an act of protection, because the fact of the matter is Nancy Adam intentionally threw that tomato at Chief Wojciechowski, again constituting simple assault. Now lastly, the plaintiff asserts that the sergeant lacked probable cause to arrest Kai Cruz, this time for harassment. And to be guilty of harassment, Mr. Cruz must have been communicating in a manner that would likely cause annoyance or alarm, particularly at a late hour. Shiloh Pittsburgh told you Kai Cruz was yelling into that bullhorn late at night. Kai Cruz admitted he was using that bullhorn, and Sergeant Cato told you she was shouting insults into the bullhorn. And after that, the sergeant told you how Kai Cruz blocked his path and attempted to elbow him square in the ribs. Any reasonable officer would have made that same arrest on May 26th. Now, following the arrest of the three plaintiffs, the charges were dropped and no narrative police report was filed. The plaintiff took this as evidence of a cover-up. But remember Lieutenant Barman's cross-examination when he told you the only reason the charges were dropped was to de-escalate already high tensions between the Numerians and the police. And the reason no narrative police report was filed was because the charges had been almost immediately dropped. That's not evidence of a cover-up. That's just a reasonable decision made by the lieutenant to keep Metropolitan safe. You see, on May 26th, Eli Adam chose to instigate a conflict and drive aggressively behind Chief Wojciechowski. He escalated the situation to the point where he had shoved the chief and his mother threw a tomato at him. All the while, Kai Cruz was shouting into a bullhorn late at night. The plaintiffs behaved unlawfully on May 26th. They instigated the altercation, they escalated it, and they have no one to blame for their arrests but themselves. So I ask you to find the city of Metropolitan not liable for violating the civil liberties or civil rights of the plaintiffs. Thank you for your time and attention, and thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you. All right, the plaintiff can offer the summation.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Holly Caravanis, and I, with my co-counsel Nicholas Fry, represented Eli Adams, the estate of Nancy Adam, and Kai Cruz in today's case. Now, as the sole triers of fact, I'm aware that you will not need to be instructing yourselves on the laws included in the would-be jury charge. However, I'd like to use terms that my co-counsel defined in his opening statement. Now, the first of these is a 1983 action. My clients in this case sued the Metropolitan Police Department for a violation of their Fourth Amendment right that protects them from unreasonable searches and seizures on May 26, 2019 by the police officers. Now, in order to prove this, we had to prove 3 elements by a preponderance of the credible evidence. The first of these elements was undisputed tonight, which is that Officer Cato was acting as an agent of the Metropolitan Police Department on that night in question. The second element is also undisputed tonight, which is that Officer Cato arrested the 3 plaintiffs. Now, not only have we heard this from all of our witnesses tonight, this is in the statement of facts, and it has been shown in the actions of Officer Cato, as all of the plaintiffs were handcuffed or restricted of their freedom of movement. They were put into squad cars and brought back to the station away from their vehicles. There, they were isolated for hours without the freedom to leave. It is clear to see that we have additionally satisfied the second element. Now, that brings us to our third element in this case. We have to prove that Officer Cato lacked probable cause for these arrests. Now, I'm well aware that you know what probable cause is. And in addition to that, you know that probable cause must be based off of conclusions of a reasonable officer. Additionally, I'd like to draw your attention to mock trial clarification number 7, which states that in addition to probable cause, these offenses must have occurred in Officer Cato's presence. It is because of this clarification that we can, as a matter of law, state there was no probable cause for the simple assault arrest of Miss Nancy Adam. This is because when Officer Cato arrived at the scene, they had only seen the aftermath of a tomato being thrown. Never did they witness Nancy Adam possessing a tomato. This did not occur in Officer Cato's presence. Now, in addition to this, as a matter of law, we can state that there was no probable cause for the harassment arrest of Professor Kai Cruz, as Kai's actions, as you've heard today, were not an offense, but rather another constitutional right which Cato violated, Kai Cruz's freedom of speech, which she is free to exercise at any time in the day. Now I ask you this, Your Honors. When Kai Cruz saw a drunk, 6'6" angry man towering over her best friend and his elderly mother who were helpless and on the ground, was she supposed to say nothing? Your Honors, it is her First Amendment to speak up when she sees a dangerous situation like this. It is because of this she should have left that night with a Medal of Honor for protecting her friends. But instead, she left the scene in metal handcuffs. Now, in the case of Eli Adams' simple assault arrest, we admit that Officer Cato had circumstantial evidence. However, I remind you that the conclusions based on this circumstantial evidence must be that of a reasonable officer. And what we've heard today is that Officer Cato is anything but reasonable. Officer Cato told you how they gained a promotion after the events of May 26, 2019, mostly based on their ability to rack up arrests, as they were all ready to arrest Numerians at what has been shown to be a peaceful demonstration. In addition, they showed that they were unreasonable when they did not go and fix their malfunctioning body camera, which would have been the best account, the most accurate account of what had occurred on that night. Now, the second most accurate account would have been an arrest report from the night in question, but they did not question Lieutenant Barman's decision to not have an arrest report. Now, in addition, they were unreasonable because when they arrived at the scene, they took crucial information from only one party in this case, that being Chief Wojciechowski and former officer Nico Reed. They were taking crucial information from 2 people who were drunk, from a man who was aggressive and had a history of anger issues. They were taking crucial information from liars like Lieutenant Barman and Nico Reed. They were taking crucial information from people who are biased against the Numerians, with the knowledge that the plaintiffs were wearing Numerian t-shirts. It is because of this that Officer Cato's actions were not reasonable on the night in question. And with this, the small burden of probable cause becomes an impossible hurdle for Officer Cato to leap. Now, a reasonable officer would have seen that on the night in question, Mountie was under the influence of alcohol. We heard 3 witnesses say tonight that Mountie's vehicle was over the center line of the highway, outside of the standard lane of travel. In addition to this, we heard Nico Reed testify that they were at a bar prior to this, and that they were actually regulars at this bar. Now, in addition to this, a reasonable officer would have learned that Chief Wojciechowski showed his concealed weapon. I ask you this, Your Honors. If it was a concealed weapon, how else would Eli Adam have known about it? A reasonable officer would have learned that Chief Wojciechowski was angry and aggressive on the night in question. They would have asked Eli Adam and Nancy Adam what had happened. They would have learned that Eli was called a crackpot Numerian and was punched in the face. They would have learned that all of Eli Adam and Nancy Adams' actions on that night were in self-defense. Now, Officer Cato and Lieutenant Barman did know these things, but instead of holding Chief Wojciechowski accountable like they should have, they were unreasonable in the fact that they covered for him. Now, thankfully, tonight, we heard the testimony of Ms. Shiloh Pittsburgh, in where she detailed a conversation between the Chief of Police and Lieutenant Barman. This conversation with Lieutenant Barman stating, "I will make sure that this doesn't look bad for us." Now, if it wasn't for Ms. Shiloh Pittsburgh overhearing this conversation, maybe Lieutenant Barman's efforts would have been successful. Maybe his efforts to have no written police reports would have been successful. And with that, the best accounts of what had happened on that night would have been erased from the record. Maybe his efforts to take no pictures of what seems to us at least crucial information, crucial evidence at the scene, that being Chief Wojciechowski's vehicle over the center line of the highway. Those efforts to cover that up would have been successful. His lack of an accident reconstruction report, despite them being necessary for all reported accidents, that effort to cover that up would have been successful. And because the charges were dropped, none of my clients were able to go to court for this without this lawsuit. Without this lawsuit being raised and without Ms. Shiloh Pittsburgh hearing that conversation, all of this information would not be out there to make the Metropolitan Police Department look bad. Barman would have been successful in covering up these unlawful, unconstitutional, unjust arrests. I'm asking you, Your Honors, to finally hold the Metropolitan Police Department liable and accountable for these unjust actions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take a brief recess of roughly 15, 20 minutes. We will try to get through it quickly. Usually there's lunch now. We realize that we're not together, you're not eating, so we'll do our best to try to move rapidly so that we can resume shortly. Court's in recess.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll be back in about 20 minutes, and we'll now ask the Zoom tech to move the judges to the deliberation room.
Judge Clark, while we're waiting, why don't we take a health break and they'll move us.
Ashley,
Yes.
can you pause the recording and head to the judge's room, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Are we ready to proceed? Thank you, everyone. We're sorry it took a little longer than we had anticipated, but we took to heart what the attorneys, I would love it if I could see all the attorneys. That makes it easier. Staring at just black boxes, wonderful. We took to heart what seemed to be everybody's desire to hear a verdict on the merits, as well as on the performance. So we spent a few extra minutes on that, and we'll happily talk about it with you. I need to make a quick adjustment on my screen. Bear with me. Okay, now I can see all of you nicely. Thank you. You were all superb. And we could stop there. And that would be a fair assessment of the performance that all four of you presented. You were superb, really. And the reason I'm hesitant to go on is there's little need. I know that you want comments. We were encouraged to give comments because you'll go on either doing this next year or doing this in the finals. So we will do so. We will be obedient and provide comments that are designed to be constructive, but not critical, because each one of you hit the sweet spot on multiple occasions all throughout the trial. So I could repeat that again and again, and please hear that loud and clear before I get into some more mundane comments that I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? What's so on? But you were well prepared, you were well spoken, you were persuasive, you were smooth in the manner in which you presented, and didn't get rattled. Really superb lawyering all around. The problem that you all have is that you're not lawyers and you didn't go to law school. So, for example, you don't realize that witnesses are sequestered as a general rule. And witness two is never, almost never in the courtroom listening to witness one. And that's why you not only can't, under the rules of evidence, but you can, as a matter of practice, say, you heard what that witness said, you agree with that witness, right? Judge Clark and I shuddered a little bit when that kept happening, but you don't know because you haven't taken any law school classes and don't know. It's precisely for that reason we want the witnesses to testify only about what they know. So for your next rounds at this year or next year, don't ask witnesses to vouch for, and counsel them in advance not to be vouching for, and don't ask questions about earlier testimony. Criminal case, it's different. The defendant is there and hears everything, but not here. Recross, and you may have heard me sort of suggest this in the way that I was trying to limit your recross. It is rare. You have to get leave of court as a general rule in order to do recross, and it should be limited, as you know, to the redirect. But that's a technical issue. You don't want to try the jury's patience. If you've got a home run or a triple that you can hit on recross, get in, get out, it's a brand new issue that hasn't been touched on, then that's when you say, Judge, may I ask a few more questions? If you're going to get back into the same issue that you've already covered on first round of cross, which is what happened for a number of these, you're better off sitting down. There's nothing like, and I think Ms. Lee did this once, there's nothing like the confidence of a lawyer saying, I don't need redirect, I don't need recross. That tells the jury, I think I didn't get hurt. So have that in mind. Route 3, this was terrible for me. I don't know where you live. I don't know where you went to school. We'll find that out in a few moments. I grew up 1.5 miles from Route 3. It has no exit numbers. So that's not your fault. You didn't write the problem. Ron Appleby wrote a marvelous problem that we all thank him for, but I kept wondering, and Judge Clark knows Route 3 as well. Let's get into some of the other comments. Opening statements, bear with me a second. I thought both openings were skillful. They were carefully structured. They were marvelously done. They were structured in a way that sounded a little legalistic by beginning with some technical things. You know, what are the elements? Which court are we in? And things of that nature, and touching on the law itself, which both sides did to one extent or another. Perfectly acceptable, perfectly appropriate. I'm going to give you a way to approach it, and think about it in this light. I want you to imagine, because the purpose of an opening, of course, is to persuade the jurors that you're right and should win, and to tell them the facts, tell them what happened. So how might one do that in a slightly different way than you did in this instance? I want you to think about if you go home tonight and a friend of yours says, what happened today? Well, I tried a case in court. What was it about? How would you try to persuade them if you had 5 minutes about what happened and why your side is right? I bet you would begin by jumping right into the facts. There was this hulking 6-foot-tall drunk police officer, and let me tell you what he did. There was this group of anti-police folks who punched and threw tomatoes and took out a bullhorn and hate the police. You probably would have started with argumentative facts that persuade. And your job is, of course, only to give facts in that argument in an opening. But I suggest you think about, in the next time you craft an opening, what are the facts? What's the story? And try to persuade through the telling of the story and then back into the law afterwards, because that's what grabs juries, in my experience. I tried cases for 19 years. And they're willing to learn about what the law is and what some of the fine rules are. They need that. But ask yourself, is that going to be the most persuasive way right out of the box for me? Language. I thought almost throughout, the language was plain spoken and common. Every now and again, you fell into lawyer speak. And forgive me, I don't remember who did this, and I don't want to pick on anyone, but one of the witnesses or one of the questions was about exiting the vehicle. I don't know about you, but I say get out of the car. I think most jurors do as well. And you have to fight the impulse as lawyers to say things that sound like what a lawyer should sound like, because you have that in the back of your mind, and instead speak like someone who's plain spoken and persuasive and use plain language. It has to be technical, of course, from time to time, but you get the idea. The first witness, Shiloh Pittsburgh. I thought that the direct and cross were both well crafted. We had confident, engaging, natural presentations. Interesting question about strategy to start with this witness. I'm assuming that plaintiffs thought there's a bombshell here. We want to get it out really quickly and emphasize what this witness heard the officers say about the cover-up. Interesting. You have to weigh that against, you've got jurors who know absolutely nothing about the case except for your opening. Do they know enough to be able to understand that bombshell if you don't lay the foundation first with witnesses who are on the scene and saw it firsthand? Just something to think about when you figure out witness order as a general proposition. Objections. Mr. Seeger, you objected right at the outset about do we bring in the numerians? Is that allowed? And they're all over the case. It's a very hard objection to win. You probably didn't think you were going to win it. And to object smack at the beginning of the first witness can be off-putting to a jury. Contrast that with what I thought was your superb objection about temper a little later in the trial. Even if you lost that one, you made the jurors think, is this fair that they're bringing out his history of having a temper? I mean, that's something you want to hammer away at. The point is, object when you think you can win, when you think you have an important point. You were very good about objecting as a general rule. We've seen trials where people are objecting right and left. And I thought you demonstrated you weren't afraid, let the evidence come in. Think about timing and the appearance of an objection, as well as the legal facet to it. Is it technically right or technically wrong? There was, I think this was Shiloh, if I'm not mistaken. And this is something that lawyers should prepare for and prepare their witnesses to be careful about. The witness said on a couple of occasions, my testimony has value because, that's not relevant because implicit in your question is. So the witness's job, as we all know, is to say what happened, not to vouch for the witness, him or herself, and say where their testimony should really be believed and where it has value and where the question doesn't have value. Just tell us what you know, what you saw, what you heard. And you can present it in that way, but you want to be careful. You would draw an objection in real life to that testimony. It would be sustained. And it's not an ideal way to proceed. I thought the witness was terrific. That's just one facet that I wanted to highlight for you. Next, Mr. Cruz, Professor Cruz. I thought they were both terrific. Easy to follow, simple questions and answers, and the same for the cross, just terrific. Eli Adam, the same. Eli Adam, I love this witness in real life, I have to say. I just thought demeanor, presentation, thoughtfulness came off really, really well. Questioning on direct, there's a technique called looping that I don't know whether, Mr. Frey, you knew that you were doing it, but you were, and you were doing it superbly. It's when you emphasize what you liked about the prior question and posing the next one. What happened after the chief punched you, and so on. Very, very nicely done. The cross about the therapist, that's an interesting one. All that medical stuff that came out, we probably would have ironed that out in advance at a motion or at a pretrial conference. I will tell you, for those of you doing this again, as to the pretrial conference, raise problematic legal issues that you think need more than just a 20-second back and forth during the course of the trial itself. Judge, we want to keep this out. We have a concern about this. We have a problem about that. You probably don't want to say, imagine that you're in the United States District Court, you're in federal court. You probably don't want to use your opening to say, Judge, you're going to be giving us 5 minutes before we do our closing. Judge, you're going to make sure that our timekeepers give us a minute. That's not for a preliminary. You don't have to worry about it. It's for the heart of the case that's really important. That's why you have the judge's attention right there. And this would have been hammered out earlier. Sergeant Cato on the defense case. Was the sergeant the one with the accent? Am I remembering it, or was that the lieutenant? You're all muted. You're not going to help me.
That was Cato, I believe.
That was Cato. Great. Love that. Love that. Cross-examination. It's sure easy for others to pick this apart, but one of the best teachers that I ever learned on cross would say, if something really bothers you, if something makes you twitch, there's something you can ask on cross-examination about that. I'll tell you what bothered me. They're arresting an elderly woman who has dementia for maybe throwing a tomato. That just doesn't seem right. You know what I mean? So you had the sergeant on direct saying a couple of times I followed orders, but also saying I thought it was justified. I thought everything that I did in following those orders and based on what happened, I thought it was justified. So you might want to say, really, do you think it's justified to arrest old ladies who suffer from dementia? That's your position for this jury. Doesn't matter what he says. You're highlighting a weakness in the case through the cross-examination. You're not attempting to get a concession necessarily. think about that as you analyze. And having said that, I thought you did that for the most part all throughout the cross-examinations. You found weaknesses, you honed in on them, you made your points, you emphasized them with a repeated question. Did lose Mr. Frey. I hope he comes back. We can't see you. And you were terrific in that respect. Lieutenant Barman, this is really hard for real witnesses in real life. If something happened that shouldn't have happened, give it up. Don't fight it. Don't try to finesse it. Don't use too much nuance, because all that's going to do is buy you another round of questions that will highlight the problem. So the problem here was you lied. You said, I talked to the mayor, and the mayor said, drop the case. But you didn't talk to the mayor. So by fighting it, you ended up having to go through that not once, not twice, but about 3 times. One way to handle it for lawyers and for witnesses is to say to the witness, give it up. Yes, that wasn't true. I didn't speak to the mayor. I knew that's what the mayor would have said, but I didn't speak to the mayor. You're correct. That's it. You're done. Move on. And that minimizes the bloodletting that you can otherwise subject yourself to. Closing arguments, I thought were excellent. Mr. Sager was fabulous. It was a fabulous blend of facts and argument, which is what real lawyers in real life strive for. And I loved how you went back to the theme that Ms. Lee had at the beginning: initiate, escalate, no one to blame, and brought it back together in that very nice way. I thought that was fabulous. Ms. Caravanis, you had some marvelous lines that really hit home with me. You know, the drunk, towering 6-foot man, no body camera, no arrest reports, over the center line, had been drinking beforehand, all that stuff. Think about what we talked about for openings. As with openings, with closings even more so, you want to persuade. Do you start with the law, or do you start with the facts that will make the jurors shake their head in agreement and say, this wasn't right? Yes, that was a problem. And then meld it into the law. Just something to think about for the next time you all do this. What will be more persuasive to those who are listening today? Having said that, I want to go back to the beginning. I thought you were all outstanding, truly. It was a real pleasure to listen to all of you. Let me stop here and ask Judge Clark to offer some comments.
All right, and I'll be brief because I know that you're awaiting the outcome. I just want to indicate that I assume you're all 15 or 16 or 17 years old, some combination in that age range. I graduated from law school when I was 24, and I did a clerkship for a year. So I was 25 before I first appeared before a Superior Court judge. And I never in my career appeared before a Supreme Court justice, let alone the Chief Justice. So your poise and your exemplary performances are something for which you should be very proud, all of you, as well as your parents, who probably have a lot to do with it, and your teachers and coaches. So I just want to indicate that, particularly because of your young age, it was extraordinary. You were very familiar with detail. When I was in the prosecutor's office, and as I gained seniority, I did teaching within the office. And I always stress to the younger assistants in the office that it is very, very important that you really have a mastery of the detail in the case. Assuming that a case is reasonably triable by both sides, the details and how you handle the details and be aware of everything that's going to come up and anticipate what the other side is going to bring up is very important. And I'm sure the chief did. I read these statements many times because there was so much detail in them. And I was trying, every time I read it, something else kind of got absorbed. You absolutely knew the case cold, all of you. I always comment that the few minutes you have for an opening or a direct or a cross is so artificially short, a period of time, that sometimes in the past I've seen that one of the attorneys or a witness will go too fast because they're trying to jam in the detail. But I thought you all did a very good job of choosing what was important, and you got a lot of detail in without racing through it. And when you race through it, it really takes away from the effectiveness, but you didn't do that. I certainly agree with the chief basically on everything he said, but I agree, you don't say you exited the car. That's kind of a police officer testifying that I stopped the car and the person exited. As the chief said, you get out of the car. You avoided phrases like, what if anything happened next? Because I've heard that in the past. What if anything happened next? If nothing happened, we probably wouldn't be here. There was a very good flow to your questioning, and you avoided that kind of thing. Let's see, we're going too fast. So, you know, again, I thought you all did a great job. In terms of a verdict, Chief, do you mind if I address that?
Please do.
I'm sorry?
Please go ahead. Please do.
Okay, okay. I first want to say that I would love to have 2 hours to absorb all the testimony and then tell you why I've reached the verdict. I mean, I've absorbed it, but in order to lay it out in an articulate and flowing way. But we don't have that much time, but just, you know, hitting the highlights. The probable cause has to exist, and for these type of lower offenses, it has to be committed in the presence of the police officer. That doesn't mean that a person who indicates he or she has been aggrieved, a tomato thrown at them or whatever, can't go down and file a complaint. But for the police officer to actually make an arrest for this type of an offense, it has to be committed in the officer's presence. I did have an issue with what was committed in the officer's presence. In terms of what Officer Cato saw, in terms of Nancy, and I agree with the chief, I thought that arrest was quite excessive. And again, that was the problem you had. But this appeared to be, we don't have ages, but it appeared to be an elderly lady in dementia, very distressed. It'd be perhaps different if there was an object that really hurt the police officer, but this was a tomato. I thought the arrest was excessive, and I did not have the feeling that Officer Cato really had enough in his presence probable cause to make that arrest. He admitted that his account or his belief was very much buttressed by other people who came on the scene and said, I saw it. So I would find for the plaintiff on that. With respect to Kay Cruz, the bullhorn, the harassing comments, the insulting comments, and I very much believe everybody should be treated with dignity. The people that are stopped on the side of the road and the police officers are involved. So everybody is entitled to fairness and to dignity. Did what he allegedly do, insulting the police officer with the bullhorn, indicating I needed to use it to be heard. He was somewhat insulting in the language he used. Is that truly harassment? There was the explanation of this was at night, can cause annoyance or alarm. I really didn't find that particularly to be harassment. Now, if he truly blocked the police officer from doing something, that might be a different charge. At one point, he says, I stepped in front of him and blocked him, might be an obstruction charge, something of that nature. But I didn't, understanding that the language was obviously insulting, that this was truly a harassment. With respect to Eli, he indicated that Monty had punched him. He said it was a glancing blow. He he indicated that I didn't assault the police officer. It didn't appear that Cato really saw that either. And again, that doesn't mean that Monty can't go down to the police station and file a complaint. But in terms of what Officer Cato saw, and I would note that Monty is not only deceased, but it appeared that, and we can't have his live testimony, but I find it very hard to believe that he nursed one drink over the entire evening. There were many references by witnesses to him smelling of alcohol and being intoxicated. And, you know, when I hear he's driving 35 or 40, when it's 2 lanes, so he's blocking everybody, and it's a 50-mile-an-hour lane, I, like almost any judge, has tried DWI cases, and sometimes driving very slowly can be one indication that that driver may be impaired significantly slowly than the speed limit, particularly with 1 lane. So I just do have the feeling that Monty was somewhat intoxicated. And again, I don't believe Cato really saw enough to constitute probable cause in his presence for Eli. So I would also note that it says something to me that the police department, the higher people at the police department, first, they didn't want it on a warrant, which would cause them to be kept in jail overnight and then have a hearing the next day. If you get a summons, it's almost like you get a ticket a police officer gives you for speeding or whatever. You're handed it and you go home and you get a notice of a date. First, it was going to be on a warrant, then it was going to go down to a summons, and then they were told they're free to go, that, you know, they're not going to be any charges. That says to me that people within the police department probably were very concerned about what might have happened out there and chose not to pursue it. And for Cato to say, I really didn't question it, I said, okay. It's hard to imagine that he wouldn't question it and resent it. So in terms of the verdicts, and this does not mean that language used toward the police by people at the scene may not have been very offensive. It may well have been. When Monty gets hit with a tomato, Eli says, we got the first blood and you're going to file for disability. Well, obviously that's very, very insulting and offensive. But in terms of probable cause committed in the officer's presence, I really did not find that that occurred. So I would find for the plaintiffs in this case, evaluating each of the 3 plaintiffs individually. So.
Thank you.
Chief?
Thank you. And the judge speaks for both of us on that. I know that it's 10 after 1. None of us have eaten. We all want to find out who won. So allow me just 60 seconds to say a couple of things before we get to that. And there were a bunch of very important thank yous. First to the State Bar. This is such a marvelous learning experience. It is an entree, hopefully an inspiration to aspiring lawyers. Now more than 80,000 students have gone through this over the years, including my 3 children. So I say this as somebody involved in the law and also as a parent. It's such a wonderful program. It takes a lot of hard work behind the scenes. Extra this year with the addition overlay of technology. I want to thank Sheila Burrow and others for all that they have done in order to enable this to go so smoothly this year. Hats off to you. Thank you to Judge Clark, who sets a marvelous example of volunteering, as she has done for many, many years, overseeing the final round here and doing it as ably as she does. It's always a pleasure to sit with you, Judge.
I'm honored to do so.
Ron Appleby spends a lot of time working up these statements and these problems year after year, and this year was no exception to that. Thank you, Ron, for your dedication. And with respect to the score, you didn't write the problem. You don't own the facts. They are what they are, and none of that is held either for or against either side if they have a better or a worse fact to have to deal with. And the same is true for much of some of the comments that we've been making that call for legal knowledge. You know, we are looking at this through the lens of a reasonable high school student, not a lawyer. So those are designed, the comments are designed to help you, but they don't factor in. Nobody lost points or anything of that nature. If you violated a rule of law that of course you won't know about for another 10 years until you sit for the bar exam. This is a challenge for us because truly both teams were superb. And it was an honor to watch and listen to both of you. It was extremely close. We find for the plaintiff, and I would ask that to the extent everybody can unmute themselves and show us their faces, please do so that we can collectively show our appreciation for both teams.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Your Honors.
Court is in recess, but if you want to speak with one another, by all means, go right ahead, including parents and proud other observers who watched this morning.
Chief, can we go in a breakout room for a second? Thank you.
Congratulations to our adversaries. Very well done.
Yeah, likewise, you guys did great.
Congratulations.
I just want to say thank you to the judges and judge.
Great job.